Greetings all. My name is Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn. I'm a student teacher and the master teacher. Thank you, Hara Habab Jadefri Rayay Hatap, for minding the introduction, and all of you on the call at the moment. So welcome to those who are joining us on the Zoom platform and who are joining us on Facebook for another Wu-Sabat Outformation class from All Eyes on Egypt, Midlands and the North. If you want the full interactive experience, then you need to join us on the Zoom platform. Facebook, we're happy to welcome those who join us on Facebook, but we're not monitoring that side of things until after this class is finished. So if you want to ask questions and things of that nature, then click the link that's been provided to join us on Zoom. It's about less than 30 seconds to register on that platform. Well, today we're talking about the harvest, and I think next week is bloodlust and religion. They're quite close in terms of subject matter, so I suppose this week you may consider it a part 1, next week a part 2, and then the week after a part 3 of the same or similar theme of topics. What we're likely to do is I think the third topic is something like message of Yaanuwn, so we might swap that out and do the Bigfoot class at the end of that 3 weeks, because I think they sync nicely together. So anything we are covering in a lot of detail today, we will revisit in part 2 and part 3 of this subject matter, which is quite large. Some may be familiar with it already. If you're not, then definitely going to be a little bit of an eye-opener, so we'll get into that in some detail. Okay, so as I say, welcome all to the class. And what we're just going to do is do a very, very quick sound check. So just make sure you can hear me okay. I had some problems with the sound previously. So if I'm going to launch this poll, if you're on the Zoom platform. So if you can answer in the affirmative, if you can hear me over the music okay. And if you cannot, then please just post some comments in the chat, give some feedback, as well as voting no. So launching that poll now, giving you 30 or so seconds to answer that. So you're just affirming, can you hear me? Okay, can you hear me clearly over the Om chant in the background? Okay, so it seems most people can who have voted. So ending that. And the second one is, can you see the visuals? Okay, so you can see them on the screen now. So I'll just do a quick back and forth there. So now there's a little bit of latency issues, so you might have a slight lag, but it should be fairly clear. Can you see it on the screen? You're going back and forth. Okay, seems most people can. If it's on some devices, you need to swipe left or swipe right to get the visuals on screen. And if you're listening to us on Facebook, it's not going to make a difference, but you're about 20 seconds behind in terms of delay to us going live and then what's broadcast on the actual Facebook channel. Okay, so let's start off the class appropriately by helping us to connect with our ancestors and within existence. So we start off the class with a chant called Partakyud, the affirmation from the Sabian culture, which we'll get into a little bit later. So I'll do that in Misbatia, or the Sabaic language first, and then I'll translate into English. Yeah, so you can follow on screen if you so choose. Abdoy Kaleh Namazurat Wu Fakur Ame Kasam Un Empa Paut Anuki Jawef Pa Ashuk Empa Paut Wu Kale Ashuk Kawun Jawef Neya Anuki Kasam Un Empa Paut Wu Pa Paut Kawun Kasam Un Emneya Anuki wahu ameh papa ut. Hu papa ut wahu ameh naya. Nakuk kadur naju ameh kasam un papa ut. Hu khabub ameh mushakhus un. Nakuk kadur kawan kale pafef. Nakuk dayur jawef papa ut. Ameh waseh ameh dayarni. Kawun lakei bakoy jawef papa ut. Anuki abed bi na fashni. Papa ut kawun anuki. Papa ut kadur nakuk kadur. Papa ut amul nakuk amul. Okay, so that was Partakyud, and let's take you back so you can see what we were doing in English. So we started off, as we start off all prayers and chants, thinking we begin all prayers and thinking as a part of all expanding or existence. And we said, I am in the divine love of the all, and all divine love is in me. I am part of the all. Sorry, I am in the divine love of the all expanding, and all divine love is in me. I am part of the all expanding, and the all expanding is a part of me. I am one as the all expanding, and the all expanding is one as me. I can succeed as part of the all expanding, or as a part of the all expanding, and fail as an individual person. I can be all that I want in the all expanding, as long as my want is to stay in the all expanding. I am never by myself. The all expanding is I am. The all expanding can, I can. The all expanding does, I do. Yeah, so that was a positive affirmation to start our class, help us to connect, as I say, with our ancestors, connect with existence which we are a part of, and are of is and is of are, that we are part of things, and so that is us. And so we just want to connect with it for a positive experience for all who are joining us today, to make sure we communicate what we have to communicate today accurately and in the best way as possible. So you join us on the Zoom platform for those on that side of things. So you can see you've got a panel here to the left. You've got control of your audio settings. So if you're not hearing us properly or need to make some corrections with the device that you're listening on, then that's the way to do it. If you've got any messages for us, we've got a facilitator on the call. And if you've got any messages that are not questions, then in the chat functions, you can see there here, you can simply select panelists and all participants, and then put any messages or feedback that you have in the chat facility. Now, if you've got questions, so this is a topic class, but you ask questions to say something you don't understand, not clear upon, etc. And just for the purposes of focus, we ask for questions to be on the topic. We do open question ask us on any topic, but we're specifically, I suppose, trying to educate or teach on a specific set of subjects brought to us by the master teacher. So just to help with the understanding, we ask for class the questions to be focused on the subject matter, but obviously if it's worth it to move to the left or right of that particular subject, then we may do so, or may refer you to another book to assist you in that regard. So, got a question, simply rate, and you're confident enough to come on. We don't bite, we don't bite, we don't kill. So we're very welcoming. So feel free to come on verbally, and you do that by raising your hand. So using that option, what will happen is periodically I will say, is there any questions? And what will happen is the facilitator will then, you'll see a message on your screen, and they'll ask you to unmute your mic. If you've dialed in to the meeting, then to raise your hand it's *9, and to unmute your phone it's *6. And so then you speak and ask your question. Once you've finished, mute yourself back. So now you have the ability as a participant in the system to mute and unmute yourself. So we just ask that you mute yourself back so that you don't disrupt the rest of the class. And that's the same, obviously, if you've joined by a computer or mobile device. Let's say you verbally come in and ask your question. The other way to ask your question is basically by putting a written question in the chat. If you're not confident enough to come on and speak directly, put a written question in the chat. Again, raise your hand. So you don't need to raise your hand. You can just put a written question anytime, and then as I say, the facilitator will ask that question for you on your behalf. If the question has not been answered fully or whatever the case may be, by all means, just give some feedback, and then we'll pick up that again as part of the session today. So, but at any point, feel free to ask questions, and obviously, Hara M. Habab, who is your facilitator today, will ask those questions on your behalf. So, polling questions. We generally sometimes will have questions just to test knowledge within the class. So if that comes up, not planned to do today, any recap quizzes, but if that comes up, then simply we'll inform you of that, and then so you can answer those questions accordingly. We'll give you time, and then we'll run through the answers together. So at some point you might be joined and there might be silence on the call or whatever, because we might be doing a recap quiz, although it should technically appear on the screen, but say in some cases it might just be that the people only on the Zoom platform can see those questions until the actual quiz is finished. Okay, well, let's go into a little bit, as I say, of an introduction. It's our first class for 2020, so a little bit of recap stuff, but also tying into what we're talking about today. As I say, we're looking at, let's just go back to the front, so not to confuse your eyes, but so we're dealing with the actual facts, the harvest, and then next week, as I say, usually class every 2 weeks, but because we ain't been on for a while, just had to adjust the schedule. There'll be a run of 3 classes, so one next Sunday and one the Sunday after, and then we'll go back into our fortnightly cycle. So, as I said at the start, we will be looking at covering, I say they cover a similar type of subject matter, but emphasize, as you know, how people familiar certainly with the doctrine of Wu-Sabat and the master teacher, the way he teaches, that they emphasize different things. So we'll be trying to pull out certain subjects of focus in each one, but they will be kind of blended. So harvest we will do today, and pick up some of that again with bloodlust and religion next week, and then what plan to do for week 3, I think the scheduled class is something like messages from Yaanuwn or something, or Yaanuwn, something of that nature. So we'll slightly change that and bring forward the Bigfoot class, and then, as I say, so those subjects nicely coming together, and then finish off with messages from Yaanuwn and extract some things as well from the harvest class nicely at the end, which really looks at, say, the Palm and Thar, or the role of the Warner in this day and time, as I say, and how that relates to the different races. So we have to be focused on our Palm and Thar, or our Warner, because obviously that individual is sent for our race, and therefore our doctrine of Wu-Sabat is tailored to optimize us. So who we're calling the master teacher? Well, that is a man by the name of Dr. Malachi Z, York Okran, and we'll get into some of the other titles in a bit. But his mother, so without his mother, he wouldn't be here. At least the physical aspect of him would not be here, and so therefore, as we do in our culture, we give respect to our ancestors. So her name is Mary Abba Okran York. She was also known as Fatima Maryam, March 10th, 1929, as our crossed over to the other side as one of our Muslafu. Yeah, that's the Sabbaic way of saying ancestors. Yeah, out of your physical ancestry. Yeah, one of your 30 personalities within you. You are at the top, making 30 all the way down to your great-great-grandmother and great-great-grandfather on both sides of the family. Yeah, you make up 30. And so, as I say, she's one of our ancestors and was the clan mother of our tribal aspect of our nation as Musbatu or Sabians. Say Mary Abba Cranial the mother of Dr. Malachi Z, Kabina York, are crowned. So you know it always starts. We're a matriarchal, or are a matriarchal, and we're always matriarchal, but obviously have been influenced by patriarchal extraterrestrial teachings in the form of the monotheistic religions. But in setting the record straight and getting back to who and what we are today, it is M first for mother. And so therefore it's important to know who the mother is of the various different great leaders or teachers, male, females, who are, as I say, indeed, conveying information past, present, and obviously going forward into the future. Now, his father was Al-Hadi Abdur Rahman Al-Mahdi, out of the royal family out of Sudan. Again, very powerful name there when you deal with Al-Mahdi family out of Sudan, linked to the Dongolawi or Fuzzy Wuzzies, as you may know them in Africa. And he's the excuse me, the grandson of Mustafa Muhammad Al-Mahdi of the Sudan, 1845 to 1885, as you see there. And his father was Sayyid Abdul Rahman Al-Mahdi. So by way of this side, again, a very royal lineage there. Again, taking us back to certain, let's say, Sudanese Islamic traditions in that regard. As I say, a very powerful line taking us back, let's say, to ancient Egypt when you're dealing with Mustafa Muhammad Al-Mahdi, pre-dynastic ancient Egypt. Let's say he was a master Karam or spiritualist, very powerful individual. Let's say helped in the great traditions of any of our great pharaohs in driving foreign invaders back into their lands out of Afaf Reye Ka'ahu, as you would say today, Africa. So this is Dr. Malachi Z. Kabina York at age 25. Then he was known as Imam Isa, or Isa al-Hadi al-Mahdi. And as I say, took us through the religious degrees from 1970 officially, 1963 unofficially. Now in ancient Africa or ancient Tamaray, so the ancient Egyptian culture, Kadem, Makhmatu, yes, us as the ancient Egyptians, we noted an individual character by the name of Amun-Nabab-Aryeh-Akhtar, understand? And in the renewal of our story, every 24 to 25,000 years, okay, 1 year to every land mile, so the circumference of the planet is 24,896 miles in circumference, so it increases to 902 and contracts and expands at different points. So in our culture, our story is renewed, say, every 24,000 or so years. Yeah. So that Amun-Nabab Akhtar, the ancient Egyptians referred to that individual as Tahuti or Tahuti. Yes. And so this is a being or a vessel where our ancestors speak through to enable us to convey, or maybe them to convey, certain information to us to aid us in our ascension or transformation journey. Do you understand? Because obviously some of the key things, particularly following the so-called slave trade, although nothing was traded, but what it formed was an interception of our genes at that point, a forcible interception of our genes that gave birth to a new hybrid type of individual, known certainly in the Americas as the American Negro, and world over, where those interceptions took place as the Negro. Yeah, so mentally dead, obviously looks, woolly hair, dark to obviously light skinned in terms of brown in color, but basically the lack of connection, language loss, so on and so forth, all the various problems that we find with the Nagaru or Nagarnadu race, Negroid race today, was introduced at that point. So in our ancestors sending warners, Parmanthar, as we would say in the language, so each to every race has sent a warner, and various different teachers maybe throughout history that you'll be very familiar with because they've made such an impact, or their teachings certain times have made such an impact on the world that they're known world over. However, then the way in which, or the lack of understanding, means that people are not familiar that an individual, for example, is sent to a specific race for their teaching. That doesn't mean that other races can't benefit from their knowledge, but you have to understand that essentially they're dealing with a form of racism insofar as their teachings are tailored for those specific people. So Mahatma Gandhi, for example, was specifically sent to the Travadu or Dravidians, or the East Indians, and so therefore, yes, he was racist against blacks. So the reality of the situation is, he may have said some wise things, so which we can, if we switch off certain sensibilities, then we can, absorb what he has to say in that regard. But he was sent to those specific people for a very specific purpose, you understand? So we have to embrace who's been sent to us, and in order to do that and provide a link to, obviously, to be rooted in the present, but for us to have full and proper factual understanding of the past, in order for us to take control of the future, then we need a factual connection to what has taken place before. So Imam Isa, or Isa al-Hadi al-Mahdi, was the name of the physical being, and the etheric part of that individual was known as El-Khadir, or the Green One. And so from 1970 all the way down, to the release of a book called The Holy Tablets, a lot of information was conveyed in a short space of time in order to prepare us, as I say, for the real deal information. Yeah, he made the statement saying, I came giving you what you want, so you would really learn to want what I really came to give. And so therefore, we at that time wanted religion, we wanted to worship, you understand, spook, spirits, so on and so forth, in the gods of the monotheistic Bible and Quran, so on and so forth. So therefore, that was all broken down, uncovered, all the way up, as I say, to this combination produced, as I say, the Holy Tablets, which was the bridge between religion and reality. So a lot of people still quote and use the Holy Tablets today, but the Holy Tablets, as a master teacher explained, is dead. And it doesn't mean dead as in the information is not useful, it just means we don't live by it no more. So in that regard, you had certain rituals like the Sabbath and other rituals in there, which we don't live by today as Sabaeans. It was a stepping stone, correcting, so setting the record straight of the various different religious degrees to bring us up to where we are today. So in preparing us for those actual facts, Tarak, master secrets, so the hereafter into the thereafter doctrine, what he really came to give, then a new combination was introduced, Malachi Z, Dr.York, or clan, and the etheric part of that being was known as Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn. So therefore, you've had a number or series of books now since that point. Now, starting off obviously with the Black Book, which are now dealing with sacred records of Atom Ray. We're now dealing with the reality of who and what we are and what our true purpose was, all the way up to, as I say, the books being released today under Actual Facts, Master Secrets, and Tarak, and restoring back our culture, linking us back to, as I say, our ancient Egyptian ancestors. Yeah, so it's a combination or a way of, I say, us doing things. Obviously, our ancestors were formidable in leaving records, etc., on the walls of ancient Egypt that have lasted the test of time, millions of years in some instances. However, it has not been our way, or it's not the way of first world people, certainly, to dig up the bones of their ancestors, etc., through archaeology, paleontology. Not that these things, some of them are not worthy endeavors or attempts, because people are looking for proof of things, but it's not been our way. Our way is from above down. That's why we talk about Outformation coming to you in form of information, because everything that obviously we are seeing as individuals, everything that we are taking in is being recorded obviously within our DNAs and RNAs, and also we have an etheric connection to the mental reservoir. So all of that information is being fed into a shared consciousness, as some may regard it as. And so therefore it can be accessed, and it helps to formulate, or natural nature will formulate solutions to problems. And one of those is when its children are veering away from the path of their natural, fulfilling their natural potential, then obviously teachers are sent in by way of our ancient ancestors, etheric ancestors, coming in to set the record straight and put us back on the path, let's say, where we're supposed to be in terms of our growth, ascension, and fulfilling our potential. So we have had many teachers along the way, and certainly for this modern or present era, it might be a better way to say it. As I say, you can see the list of teachers, various ones connected. Now, each one of them came with a part of the story, but didn't have the full information. So Honorable Elijah Muhammad, excuse me, came with a part in terms of preparing us and taking some of the downtrodden within our race, trying to move them into a collective, organized unit, which he was able to do. But he spoke of one to come after him, I say, with the Book of the Lamb, which is the holy tablets, the code for the Lamb, which is an Arabic letter. It's like an L for those of you not familiar with that language. And the thing with the holy tablets, every chapter starts with the word Lo. Yeah, so this was a hidden science to show that that book was kind of codified in a certain way. 19 chapters, let's say, linking to that 19th elder, El Khadir, or the Greek one as well, or Yaanuwn as well, 19th elder, which, as we know, at the end of the 24,000 year renewal of the story, the 19th elder takes up the 25th seat, which is on Earth. So if you think about 24 elders, and then within the middle of that is the 25th seat, which is on Earth. And even in our system of governance, you have an Earth-based 24 elders, and you have obviously the etheric or esoteric-based 24 elders overseeing our development, because it's say as above, so below. And you know that our ancient Egyptian ancestors, in order to stay connected with our ancestors, we developed systems that matched the shape or systems that we saw in the stars. So say Honorable Elijah Muhammad came, part of the story, Dr. Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, and again, formidable researcher, author, making that connection to ancient Africa or ancient Egypt. But his stumbling block or blockage was the fact that he was still born into the religion of Mosesism, so to speak, and still connected himself to that from a religious point of view. But obviously made the point of showing the connection of blacks, Nagarnadu, Negroids, and their connection to ancient Egypt, Africa, and the great things that were done there with evidence, proof, so on and so forth. But he still referred to them as the Egyptians, the this, the that. So not a critical factor for his great works. But obviously in this day and time, as we have moved forward, the first thing that we say is, well, I am an Egyptian. I am Insan Anuki Kadem Muhammadu, or I am Anuki Muhammadu, Insan, I am an Egyptian. Do you understand? So we don't say the as if we're separated from them. We are them, despite many millions of dollars, pounds, whatever, invested in trying to disconnect us from ancient Africa and the much greatness that has led to the human development on this planet, separated us from that. However, as I say, many have sacrificed to ensure that that's not the case, and he was one of those great individuals in this day and time, and so should be respected in that regard. Afro Unum again came with certain information about the nature of nature, and so again, a significant character in the 60s, and again, but however, he didn't have the full knowledge. He didn't come with a language in this day and time, which is significant. Most maybe don't understand the importance of that in our transformation. But I didn't have a language in that time, but certainly brought in some very important topics about understanding how motion, movement, existence, and nature of planets, stars, and the system that they sit within existence, very important. And so you cannot underestimate the power of that in, as I say, maybe dismantling to some degree the childish notions around God, or people talking about Most High and these different things, etc. And then when certain things come up on this planet, for example, maybe an unexplained death or something, or even coronavirus now, you find ourselves in this situation. Well, okay, how does that fit in with your monotheistic religions? How does it fit? Because all the churches, the mosques, the synagogues of the government say, hey, you can't open today, they're closed. Same way like everybody else is closed. So understanding what's really going on, and things like predestination, all these various different topics. You hear a lot of statements. Well, if you're in a bad, oftentimes people say even they're in a bad situation or something, that's how it's supposed to be, or that's how it should be, or saying I went through that and I wouldn't have had it any other way, or so on and so forth. And so a lot of different explanations. I think if you're under the impression that your ancestors are going to put you in situations where your life's going to be in danger, and things of that nature to help you with your growth, I think you don't understand the planetary. Oftentimes, we are the ones who put ourselves in those situations from the decisions that we make. So you are, in fact, where you are supposed to be because you have put yourself in that situation. So we need to take much more control over the course and destiny of our lives, and not to say that there are not other influencing factors. So certain things clearly within existence, or energies that have existed particles, different things, different types of life forms have existed for millions into trillions of years, and their ability to influence things which are going on here is why it may feel magical to say, oh, this is influencing that. And obviously your eyes are being opened in Wu-Sabat as to what is taking place in the darkness. So we we talk about the seen, which is obviously the visual, the semi-seen, which is the spiritual, and then the unseen, which really is still, that is a world of things, or existence, or things small enough that we can't see, but we can perceive, or certainly in this physical form. We can see them in an esoteric form, but can't see them in a physical form, with our physical eyes, I should say. And so they are perceived but not seen, and tasted, smelled, so on and so forth. As we start to move more into the mental, and we covered that in some classes, doing natural ether energy. But the point is that none of that is hidden away from you. But it's taken a Dr. Malachi Z to take what everybody else taught and gave to us in terms of stepping stones, and now bring that back and put that together in a form where nothing now, in terms of truth, can be withheld from you. The symbolism that sat in many symbols, paramaz, symbols of paramazat, symbols that we had, all being uncovered, as say, and to the various different, as we ascend in various different levels, for those who are worthy, will simply get back those secrets and the access back to the powers that we had, where we controlled, as I say, the forces of nature, as it's our natural skills and ability to do so. So in order to do that, we need to go through a certain set of schools to lift off this spell, as I say, which this interception, certainly for the last 6,000 years, we've been under some duress, one might say, but certainly in the last 400 years with the kidnapping of our people and the interception within our genes, which was nothing to do for labor, but actually for the plasma within our blood, which we see now with COVID-19, is necessary for those who have a certain type of disease, hemophiliacs, excuse me, which in the UK, remember, it was the Order of the Roses. You had the Order of the Red Rose and the Order of the White Rose. Order of the Red Rose obviously were interested in our blood. The Order of the White Rose were interested in what they call white blood, or Mafhuzet, which was, as I say, you can find in the semen and other life healing properties, etc., which, as I say, those who maybe have more recessive genes want those things from those with dominant genes for their survival. Understood. So Wu-Sabat came in with the changing of the cycles from 1970. So we're moving from the moon cycle into the sun or solar cycle. And so therefore the new information, NU or NEU, new information was necessary, and it was the mental resurrection of our people. Hence why you see, I'm going to skip through some of these things, hence why you see the symbol in this day and time as the Ankh Twi, the double Ankh. So the first Ankh represents present life. Here, as you see, the circular part of the Ankh is dealing with, you might be able to see that just about in the corner. This is an Ankh Twi symbol here. So the first Ankh represents the present life. As you know, the circular part represents the womb, and the downward part represents the phallus. Yeah, so the production of children. And then the second Ankh represents our resurrection, yeah, from the mental death that this spell, as I say, placed upon us. And so we're being resurrected and reshaped into a new being, or Nubian, some say, but new being in this day and time, as I say, with the full knowledge, having our language, culture, so on and so forth, restored back to us. Yeah. So they talk about double resurrection. That is a double resurrection. So resurrection's always got two parts to it. So obviously we were resurrected in the first half an hour from 1970 downwards, where we went through those particular religious degrees you see here, and then the second resurrection, now we're coming into the full knowledge of who and what we are in this day. And as you can see here from these symbols here, the cultural, the way of life, Wu-Sabat, under various different names in, as I say, this modern era, but obviously in ancient times it may be classified as animism. We'll get into that a little bit. Then you got Sabatuyi or Misbatia, which is a language today, Sabaic, resurrected, dead language, resurrected again for us to speak in this day and time, say, which enhances the culture, but also more importantly starts to reopen, connect certain, opens up certain centers in the brain, enables us obviously to come together. Because one of the key things about Wu-Sabat, or the spiritual science of the Nadu or Negroid, is its unifying properties. Many people forget this, even from the old school, is that the solution or the cure, the cure in this day and time was that this mental information that would be passed on is supposed to be a unifying factor as our people. And people always talking about what this race is able to work together and achieve this race is able to work together and achieve this, so on and so forth. Where they're united primarily under their religious beliefs and culture, even if they have different sects and etc. within that, they're united against everybody else by following a certain pattern of approach culturally and what they believe, I suppose, in a religious sense. So they're able to unify in that regard, and there's power in that. And obviously the Negro, the hybrid Negro that was created, say as a result of the kidnapping or slavery, is in everybody else's culture, you understand, and it always doesn't want to acknowledge oftentimes their race and wants to be another. I'm a Muslim, I'm a Christian, I'm more whatever, do you understand? Always want to be other than self. And even those who do sometimes within the Sabian culture acknowledge, they always want to try and be somebody special. I'm this, I'm in connection with this or that, so on and so forth. Not just want to focus on the simple mastering of certain details and cultural things to build, say, a pattern of, say, approach, because the pattern and the consistency obviously is the key. And it might not happen in this lifetime, but you're going to be prepared that what we're doing now is going to have the results and the benefits in the next 100 years, the next 200, 300, so forth, until the shift happens again in the genes in 400 years time. So our children's children coming out, as I say, with the work that we are doing, feeding into the morphogenetic field that we do today. So we're known as Musbatu, Sabians, or some say Sabians, and that is the people, which you can see. This is the same word, Sabat, which ties into the Sirius star system, and also means star as well, in that regard. And so, importantly, the language, etc., is getting back into those natural tones, F major, A major, and C major, very important. for us, and obviously even in our prayer system and things of that nature, tonation is very important in terms of tuning us back in. So Wu-Sabat in that regard is like a frequency, and so we have to basically stay aligned. This is why, as I say, when you think about how our ancient ancestors lived, their whole thing was to stay in connection with the stars. It's why even our cities, so on, so you saw them in direct correlation with the above by staying in tune. We are the result or evidence of people untuned, and more importantly, the way we've been untuned is not only by us being given religions that were not designed for our physical structure and esoteric structure, but also because we are mixed now. There are those who have now entered into our genes, and as I say, it's like introduced white noise, so to speak. So like when you're tuning into the old school radio stations, you used to turn the dial. Some of you still in your cars or whatever, you're tuning in, and if you're not quite on the station, your digital panels or whatever the case may be, you're gonna get that shh, shh, sound noise or whatever, because you're not quite tuned in. And this is what this creates for us in our genes. Even the food that we're eating, where we're living on the planet, in city environments, so on and so forth. All this is designed to untune us, stop us from connection. So, with the urgency, for those who are familiar with this doctrine, the urgency that the master teacher often spoke with about the day and time, obviously, that we were living in. And now we find many of the things that he spoke about in terms of the urgency of where we needed to be in our own land, our own culture, so on and so forth, was certainly pertinent for where we are at right now. So if we still had that land, which was stolen from us in 2004, 476 acres in Georgia, where would that be right now if it had been allowed to continue, us left alone to do what we were doing, to evolve our culture? Where would we have been right now? Where would the children that we were raising to be? Where would they be right now? So you can see how important now people having to make decisions about vaccines and what to take or not take, so on and so forth. What the importance of being on your own land, living for and by one another in a natural environment, what that would have meant for our potential as a people. So now we're in emergency 101, still needing to have those same things, let's say, that everybody spoke about. And none of those other teachers provided those things. So they didn't provide a land, so on and so forth, for us to live on, these types of things. So, which was the ultimate destination point for you to be able to do what you're doing. But even then, Mukasu or the Caucasus or Kakasnadu still want to involve themselves, still want to try and interrupt what we're doing. Do you understand? Not leave us to it, because, as I say, they have their own agenda, which is, say, certain of their hybrids wanting to see us destroyed, you understand, so they can obviously progress. But unfortunately for us, the decadent ways which we see here too prevalent in the Western Hemisphere, we have in-housed and learned to love. So you have to see, well, who's who now, whether we're willing as a people certainly to change, because we're not the same as what we were. And even now we are suffering from the same diseases, where you went 30, 40 years ago, you might have said, it would be more rare for us to be suffering from cancer, leukemia, these different types of diseases, whatever, but now you cannot say that. You understand? So so it's not really a differentiation or distinction between us. The gap is sort of closing, and that's what they talk about, which is certainly in their religious degrees of living in the image and the likeness of the beast. Okay, so we talked a little bit about this in terms of feminine forces of nature bring about this individual, the vessel or vehicle to allow our ancestors to speak to. Hindus in their culture talk about avatar, say in the Islamic degree, talk about Ilamut Jasid. But in ancient Africa, ancient Egypt, first world people, we're talking about Amun Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, as I say, Egyptians referred to that being as Tahuti. And as it says there, to come to disclose a hidden past and changing presence, so we can take, as I say, control of our destiny, future. The word destiny ties into the word destination. So where are our genes? Taking control of where our genes excuse me, are growing or evolving into a certain type of direction. And as you know, 24% of our DNA is in a transient state. So it means that we're constantly evolving, we're affected by our environment. So we can't reach optimum state. And we're not people always say we're not perfect. Well, what are we here for then? But we are striving for perfection. You understand? So this is why we're here. We're here to improve ourselves, overstood and fulfill our potential. So yes, a person should seek to be perfect in terms of being striving for it. But obviously some of the issues is that we're putting each other down, or sometimes we pull down leaders based upon religious standards that have nothing to do with our culture. So as soon as somebody makes one little mistake, they want you to, the kind of God complex situation will pull the individual, pull that leader down, judge them by moral standards of the West, which have nothing to do with our culture. So Elijah Muhammad conflict with Malcolm X because of the amount of wives that he had, but actually in the context of everything, now was that worth? Was that worth the destruction or the conflict that arose out of that particular situation? Well, no, it's probably the answer now in the bigger scheme of things. So the thing is, stay out of people's bedrooms. That's the number one rule, because they always want to try and bring people down by way of the sex force or six ether. They do it to their own people, and certainly have progressively done it for ours. That's not to say, as I say, no justification of mistreatment of females or women, no mistreatment of males, if that's the case or whatever. So, nature's rules are nature's rules. So, the sex force must be managed, but as I say, it's used adversely in a lot of situations. And one of the most dangerous things in this day and time is trial by media. So, even though the weakness of the justice system as they have it today, there are certain principles, but we know it obviously within that system they don't exist for us, which is innocent before proven guilty. We know in this society, just based on our skin color, it's in reverse. Guilty trying to prove ourselves innocent because of the way we look, has always been the case. But when you get trial by media, you don't get even none of those principles. So it's even a lesser, as I say, set with no principles. And say whoever decides is the next person to be under the cosh, and they know this and have used that to their advantage. It's one of the reasons why I say maybe the master teacher finds himself in a 135-year sentence. And what I'm saying is that can't continue to happen. How many leaders are going to be, find themselves, or teachers, as I say, find themselves at the end of, situations which are not factually based or going against even the laws that they say they live by. People manipulating things for their own agendas. It's not really based on any type of true justice, and you find the same pattern and situation with all those leaders that we mentioned there even previously, and more that you can add to the list. Find themselves in prison, killed or assassinated, character defamed, and so on and so forth. So coming in front of our people, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm looking forward to seeing it. Judas and the Black Messiah, specifically speaking about COINTELPRO, which was heavily featured in the case against the master teacher, or that approach or strategy, which, as you know, started with Marcus Garvey. So many years of strategy in the making, and the problem oftentimes that we find ourselves in is that we are very naive about the nature of we're very naive sometimes about the nature of what those who have a problem with us will do, as I say, to stop us from progressing. And TV plays a lot to do with that, because it continually programs you to perceive that certain groups of people have emotions, care, and have a soul, but they're also the very best of actors and actresses. So you're looking through the TV, so it can give you the impression that this person has emotions, they have a soul, they really care, whatever the case may be. And if you actually analyse your reality, it may be very different. Okay, moving forward. So obviously we're a fact-based culture, and so, as I say, in the first 30 years we dealt with evidence, experience, and reason, and then in the hereafter, so after the Devil's Rule ended, when the nines aligned, the 9th of September 1999, we're moving now into our culture. It was the introduction, as I say, of even more substantial information dealing with actual facts, master secrets, and say the guidance or the way, Partarak. And so you see here that we seek to prevent information in many different types of ways to make it clear. When we say sound, right, reasoning, sound is like foundation, sound, firm, is that foundation. We talk about sound, yeah, solid, not sound nice reasoning. So when you're listening to these classes, and hopefully when you're testing other people's classes, you should put them to the test. So question them. Don't let them sit there. Some people claiming to be Raziel, others claiming to be elders, young elder, whatever the case may be. Well, put them to the test and let them sit there and spear off information that sounds heavy, sounds nice, and then not put to the test. We never let the master teacher, Dr. Malachi Z, you'll get away with that. We question him, even today, question him for over 40 years. You see many books that deal simply with the questions that we asked. So nobody else should be able to get away with not asking questions. That foundation that he laid is supposed to change the mindset of us individually to check things out. That means check everything out, check everybody out. You understand, when we're asking questions, not because, as I say, an institution's been around for a long time or a book has been around for a long time. You don't ask questions, you understand? And so, and even people who claim to be, I ask questions, what you find is that they only ask questions to the people who say to them ask questions, and don't ask questions to everybody else. And I've given examples before. When you think about those who got children, you place your trust in the various different institutions, maybe those of you who are not homeschooling. And when you put our children into the school, we don't even check and ask, hey, is that even a teacher who's teaching? No, we've seen the physical qualifications of that individual. Have we seen their CV? You understand? So we're leaving our children in the hands of individuals who we have not checked and verified. Understood? Yeah. But yet when you come to join the school, they're asking you for ID, who's your child, this, holy, but things they asking you questions, but have you seen who's sitting with your children every day? Have you seen their physical qualification? Then you're in a state of belief. If you haven't, yet you claim to love your children, you claim to look out for their best interests, so on and so forth, because you wouldn't let somebody babysit in your house, for example, if you use babysitters who didn't check and do all these checks and verify it, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to certain institutions, we trust, even though the outcomes they have provided for our children historically have not been optimal. So it still shows how much we are under the spell. So the tools being equipped with you are obviously 6 W's on knowledge questions, and the W is symbolic of the 2 U's, who you are by nature, and then obviously what you come to accept in terms of decisions that you've had to make oftentimes for survival in this society, which has created another, some may say the fake you, to some degree, which is not necessarily always aligned by helping you to get towards who you are. So it creates a what as opposed to a who, and that can be change of accent or voice, wrong diet, it can be fitting in with certain things, etc. Which all of that may help you to survive physically, but as I say, maybe cause that it's moving in the opposite direction for where you need to be esoterically. And we have to learn to manage those 2 together. So 360 degrees mastery of the physical and 360 degrees mastery of the esoteric. So it is, the first steps. This is from a book called The Proof. What, where, when, why, how. So those 6 knowledge questions, and who. And then you're seeking proof. Confirmation is the next step. And then that should basically reveal whatever that thing is. So these are the steps. You hear people talking about transparency. The word transparency doesn't feature in here. Yeah, transparency. When we're talking about organizations, trans means change, and then parent or trans moving. Yeah, trans moving parent. Who's that speaking about? Well, I was talking about nomadic people. Transparent, who had transparent skin. Understood? Yeah, they don't have any color. Moving people, as you see, and nomadic people, as you see throughout what's called the Bible, a certain type of people who their God or extraterrestrial seemingly chose and looked after and instilled into them, instilled racism so that no one would mess with their DNA or genes or whatever. That's what transparency is making reference to. So you're seeking confirmation, you're seeking proof for things to be revealed. And so these are our 9 steps of quest, and that starts with questioning first. So the word question has the word quest in there, and they say each journey is begun with 1 step. So this is what we're getting back into that mindset. As I say, our ancestors did not build pyramids, they did not build our society based on faith and belief. So the religion of animism, as I say, going way back, Wu-Sabat is what we refer to as today, Wu-Sabat, as it's been known as in different incarnations. But the place of origin, you see Orion and Cyrus, features heavily in our culture. So animism today, as I say, that everything we do is descending from a soul force first, not spiritual. Soul force, spirit, as you know, is not natural nature. A spirit houses or inhabits things of natural nature. You understand? But so we are a soul force, and we say we stem from that soul force or energy first, going back to that. So as animists, dealing with all things pertaining to natural nature. Its origins as it pertains to us, as I say, Orion and Cyrus, or Sirius. Some say we can explore that in some detail in these classes today. So here, extract from my brother, the Extra-Terrestrial. And as we can say, that religion is animism, but as I say, here we see, as I say, this connection, really when you unmask what we're talking about when we say religion, as you can see, it takes us back to holy. When you talk about holy, it's taking us back to the sun, not holy as in finding holes in who I am and what I'm doing, but rather taking us back to the sun, Helios, sun, but all the way back to ancient Egypt. Now, we are the terrestrial representation of the sun, but as I say, extraterrestrial things in nature are all part of our existence. So still we need to be comfortable with that. Many have tried to make us feel ashamed of that aspect of things, but we now need to address it because there's a whole set of our story that is not making sense if we don't. You understand? So everything on this planet, you can see, has fur, animals, certain types of species of human being. We are the only ones on the planet with bar hair, woolly hair. So that's showing you even that is extraterrestrial in nature. So Thahuti or Thahutwi himself from Sabatat or Sirius bring to us, as I say, our way of life. So probably the greatest ever administrator the world has ever seen in terms of record keeping. And so those records are necessary to aid, as he did in many times, aid in Ha or Haru, some say, in his battle against the adverse forces. Understood well here, teaching us in this day and time by way of, as I say, the Sirius, the star constellation, which is where those individuals came from, as well as Ashtat, who they call Isis. She was also from Cyrus or Sirius. Yeah, this is our etheric ancestry, known as the Palanatharu, versus our Salafu, who is your kind of great grandmother, so on and so forth. Yeah. So here, it's just giving some indication of where these different religions, as I say, come from. Certainly when we talk about the monotheistic religions today, they are all based upon the worship of the sun, really, in terms of some of the failed or distorted cosmology that sits within their teachings. But it's really fire worship, and that comes from Zoroastrianism, based upon, say, an Anunnaki individual by the name of Mazda. This is the deity that Abraham, or the character Abraham, or in the Sumerian doctrine. This is who they worshipped, and so the symbol of fire you see, used in their various different cultures array. We have Olympics, I think, this year, and you see the symbol of that is what? The torch, and they run that torch, making a circumference of that torch, isn't it, with the marathon runner who runs, as I say, symbolically, as I say, taking that torch around the planet, a ring of fire, overstood, tying into Saturn, the sixth planet, and a symbol of their liberation, as you see with the statue of liberty. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in part 2 of this class, but it all ties back to, and we will get to that possibly not today, but in part 2 of this class, into Mithraism. Look it up, Mithraism. Yeah, so the whole Jesus story, so-called Christianity, all of these things tie back into Mithraism. When the Catholic Church, for example, some of their rituals, iconography, so on and so forth, it ties back into that. So we'll get into that, so more in part 2 of the class today. All right, let's move forward. We'll cover some of these things again in part 2. Okay, cool. Let's get into it then. So a few things. It says, if you won't drink poison, then don't listen to fools. I think that's a nice one. So don't be taking in out there. Not everything that looks like Wu-Sabat is Wu-Sabat. Not everything that looks like it's culturally relevant to us is. So, as I say, look at that maxim by the master teacher there, Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn. If you won't drink poison, then don't listen to fools. So we are open-minded, and we do read with an open mind, but as we showed you in the reflection and projection class, you need to also read with a controlled mind. So you need to be gatekeeping what you're taking in, because obviously it affects what you see, what you're taking in. So reflection and projection, that is what you take in, you then interpret in your brain, and then you project an image through into what you see on the outside of yourself. So what you take in, what you explore knowledge-wise or whatever, be careful out there. You're not going to hear us cursing on this platform for class. You're not going to hear us dissing other Sabians or in that regard. You're not going to hear those low-level, low-life type of characteristics. You're always going to see it delivered with a certain type of class, so on and so forth, as we try and strive to be the highest aspects of natural nature when we're doing things. So be mindful of those things, because if something's being intermixed with that, then it's not right. So be careful what you take in out here. A lot of charlatans, a lot of people claiming to be in contact with the Anunnaki, in contact with the Panatharu, do you understand? All these different types of things. Whereas those who are and have these titles are much more humble, much more circumspect around how they use. When the master teacher talks about using these titles in Partarak, emotions, and the apostates, talk about, look, I'm only using these titles because that's my job. I'm not using it for a scenario and situation where I'm trying to be greater than this or greater than people, so on and so forth. You see that characteristic heavily in people who are holding positions or whatever. They prefer to not use those titles, but if they have to, then so be it. And there are consequences in our culture for using titles that are not bestowed upon you. And our ancestors are not dead in some ground somewhere. They're firmly alive, and the consequences of what happened to those archaeologists, paleontology, who came into our land and took advantage of certain things that didn't belong to them. Just because you don't think something's going to happen, trust me, your ancestors have a mindset like this. They don't forgive and they don't forget. So don't forget all this lovey-dovey type approach. They do not forgive and they do not forget. That is a mindset of the Nataru. Not to say they're not loving, but they have a side to them that you don't want to mess with either. So thank nature for being there when you need it. So very important in this day and time with global warming, climate change and things of that nature, we've been, say we, all human beings have certainly been very wasteful. And this society certainly tries to teach you that the value is in scarcity. So when things are less available, then they become more valuable. Well, we need to reverse that mindset, because nature works in a situation where it overflows. It's always in abundance. We need to be grateful for that abundance. We need to be thankful for that abundance, that there's a certain amount of air, sufficient air for us to breathe, that there's fresh drinking water, and these type of things, which are now becoming scarce when they were certain times in abundance. And we live on a certain half of the planet that, as I say, takes more advantage and liberty with people living on the other side of the planet, because you have this first world, third world type scenario and situation. So we can sit there, thinking that we're being all righteous and holy, blah, 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 blah. But some of the things that, as I say, our society today that we live on is predicated upon, it causes other people around the world to suffer. So there needs to be a transformation and change. We need to be conscious of that. And this is why it's always bigger than ourselves. It's always bigger than you're making decisions for yourself as an individual, but for those who they consider to be the conscious community. If that consciousness means something, it's because you're having to make decisions about race. And if you're making decisions about race, i.e. all of us collectively, because we're not judged as individuals, we're judged as a race, then you have to think about the environment, i.e. Mapa, the planet Earth. So you have to think about Mapa, and the Earth itself, this planet, and the caretaking of it, which has been the intelligence within it, and the cybernetic system. The Greeks refer to as Gaia. We refer to the planet as Mapa. So has its existence is so old that it's not worth speaking about in the context of the age of human beings. So if we've been around for 46 trillion into 76 trillion years, well, how old has the planet been around for? So this is what we have to now start taking care of. Now, to accept a race is to accept their curse and the judgment for their evils. We did a class on true justice, Ma'at, I should say. True justice, went through a number of things. So, there's as I say, there's a thing where they want you to intermingle into the genes and the genetics. For no other reason, I suppose, than they seeking for us to inherit their fate. So you have to be careful about words like forgiveness, etc., and what they mean in the context of other races. So, certain time, if somebody's done something wrong in terms of race to another, obviously, which is a violation of the code of races. When somebody does something specifically detrimental to another race because of their race, then, as you know, the way nature's system works, it falls upon the individual and it falls upon their children as well. So you accepting is to take on board that person's fate. So sometimes you have to leave. Now, would they do that for you? In a lot of instances, hell no. So the reality is you have to leave people to their, certain times you have to leave other races, they've done something wrong, you have to leave them to their fate. And so we've seen situations because of the nonsense of monotheism where we're interjecting ourselves in, not letting the person get their full punishment for what they've done, and then interjecting ourselves, and now you inheriting the fate designed for that individual. It's a weird set of processes. You don't find it in reverse. So this is part of the sickness, I suppose, that we find ourselves under in terms of the spell. Okay, let's get into this class today. I've rattled on for a little while. Any questions so far? It's a bit of a longer introduction because we haven't been around for a minute. Any questions?
Yes. Someone has their hand raised. That's Sertet. So Sertet, what I'm going to do, I'm going to allow you to speak. If you make sure that your microphone is unmuted, you can ask your question. So you're now allowed to speak. That's Sertet.
Greetings.
Sertet, do you want to ask your question? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Oh, she's still got her hand raised. Make sure that your microphone is unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. You can ask your question.
Attack. Rahima was Musa. The question I had was War of the Roses. The red roses representation was the red roses and the white roses. So I want to know what species they were. I know they were Makasu, but which were the Adamites, which were the Nordics, which were the Flugeroids, whatever they were, would you know which species red rose represented and the white rose represented?
So I suppose we are getting into that a little bit later in this class today, but that's more of a modern thing. So, you're talking the Battle of Bosworth and these type of things. So you'd be definitely talking about the hybrids, as in the Wadam or the Adamite, and who biblically they're called Canaanites, which is we talk about Adamites, that's the white race, and then when you're talking about red and ruddy race, and then we're talking about the Canaanites, obviously that is the white race from the disease of leprosy or leproma. So it would be the modern hybrids that you're speaking about, understood, who obviously sought to correct some of their deficiencies, genetic deficiencies, by finding out clearly that the plasma in the blood helped with hemophilia, or them as hemophiliacs. So that is why they were seeking, as I say, that solution to that problem in Africa, understood. And then you have obviously the other issue, which we'll be talking about more today, which is around, as I say, being Rh negative in their blood types or groups, and many other diseases, which not for this particular class, we cover more in part 2. And ailments that they had, which they ended up spreading around the world through their travels. So it's the modern hybrids that we're talking about when we're talking about the order of the white rose and red rose. White rose, as I say, is looking for Mahfuzat, so it's got many different other names, philosopher's stone, etc. So crushing up even the bone, digging up mummies, crushing up the bones of our ancestors and drinking it. You understand? So that's a particular order looking for that solution, which was, as I say, in our genes and genetics. At one time, when we had the baraffery gland, which, as you know, is a missing gland, because we have 9 glands as opposed to the 7. So the baraffery gland, at one time, it secreted mafkuzat into the bloodstream of our ancestors. So when it's in us, it secreted that same thing, which gave us obviously access to our higher senses, telepathy, clairvoyance, psychometry, and intuition. So that made us whole again, a full, complete being as you would have it today. Obviously, that gland has been removed and needs to be replaced back. But that's what that white rose order relates to the York and the Lancasters, and then obviously the red rose is the blood, which is really related to the plasma, which we now see has come full circle around today with COVID-19, as the plasma in the blood being one of the solutions to deal with COVID-19, which has been designed to wipe out the hybrids. Understood?
Okay, so the species or the order of the red rose, they were which people?
Sorry, say
that was it. The order of the red rose through the battle at Boswell, the Boswell battle, or the Battle of the Boswells, Bosworth rather. Who were they? What species?
They are your modern day Caucasnadu, Caucasoids, just modern day Caucasoids.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not Flugeroids, not going back that far. It's the modern day, who today, as I say, refer to hybrids. Further on in the class, we'll go into that today, and then so you can work out where certain beings have come along. Flugeroids, you're talking about, several thousand years ago. We talk about the modern day Mukasu is only dealing with 6,000 years. And so that's a modern hybrid, as we get into in this class today, where you've got a combination of the Anakim, or Anunnaki, as they're referred to, although Anunnaki is an event rather than extraterrestrials, the Pleiadians, understood, and then mixing their genes in with the Sans people in Africa, because when they tried to do their own hybrids, it didn't work. So therefore, they had to utilize us in Africa to try and create a being in their image and after their likeness. And that's the more modern hybrid. There were hybrids before then, and so that's what we'll get into in today's class. If you just hold on, we'll get there.
Okay, so can I just ask, while going back a bit again, you know, when you talked about the tones of the planet, I mean, well, the various tones, F, C, and A.
Yes.
Because I thought there was one for the body, one for the planet, and one for the universe.
That is correct, yes.
So you had the planet, the body, and nature. So is nature then the universe?
So yes, so nature is a system that is put in place to manage, that it sits within existence and manages it by a set of rules. So you could say cosmos, it's the one that you use, it's the one that we use, I suppose, to connect with our ancestors. So that's what you'd have playing in the background. Excuse me, would be C major. F major is a tone of the planet, A major is a tone of the human body. You understand? Obviously, when we're together, and we would chant together, then that would be A tone. But if you're, say, for example, you were sitting at home and you're doing a ritual, then you're going to play C major in the background, because that's the one that you want to connect with your ancestors with. So yes, it is nature, but understand that nature is a system. It's a reactive system, a set of rules that are in place to govern, as I say, the existence. When you say natural nature, you're talking about, natural nature, now you're talking about the beings who are in control of that system. Do you see what I'm saying? So lower life forms or lower races who don't have the link back to the original source or force that grew all of this, as we talk about nine ether, then they are of nature. We are of natural nature. This is why we talk about our age or where we came from, where we've always been here in some way, shape, or form in place of that energy. So the reason why nature is a system, a reactive system, and the reason what happens is people get confused with that and their God, because those rules, there's no judgment or decision making. You understand? They're kind of built in so that, as I say, we give this example all the time, but fire, for example, will be created as long as the rules of fire are triggered. It gets created. Now, if you're in a nursery and there's a gas leak, for example, and somebody strikes a match, what's going to happen?
Combustion.
Yeah, you're going to get an explosion. You understand? Yeah. Kill the children, etc. You see what I'm saying? So if obviously something or someone was in charge of that, they're going to stop that fire from being created. See what I'm saying? Because it's just killing children. But in nature's system, there's some things where just because we don't think fire needs to be created, there are scenario situations where it does need to be created because it's just part of a larger or bigger system. So the way they've designed things, there's no judgment in it. It will slow things down as well. And then what happens when you get a scenario where there's conflict? So somebody might say, well, there should be fire in that situation, or it shouldn't be fire in that situation. And then you get two things opposing each other. There are consequences to even those types of delays. So you don't have the kind of ambiguity that comes from decision making with certain systems. The decision needs to be either this or that and done. And so nature is a reactive system in that regard, self-sustaining, self-sufficient, you understand? And so many things are subject to that. Almost everything is subject to it, as opposed to ourselves. We are supreme beings, so we are part of it, but we're also outside of that nature system. Hence why nobody else is using this term, natural nature or unnatural nature. Natural nature puts us outside of it as supreme beings.
Power attack. Thank you very much. Could I also make a request, and that is if you could just speak patch higher. I mean, you were a lot clearer now when I'm having this conversation with you, but you sort of faded slightly during your presentation. So
okay, no problem. Hopefully I'll speak a bit loud. I'll just turn the volume up slightly.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, okay, so thank you for your questions. So there we go now. So just reminding us that, as I say, extraterrestrialism or extra-terra astral has always been part of our culture. And so in this day and time, we need to make ourselves comfortable with it. When you're saying extra, excuse me, to terra astral from the skies, that can be a meteorite, which obviously is from outside, and when it comes to Earth, it becomes a meteorite. You can do with comets, you can do with sun rays, different things. You understand? Obviously, you've got older races out there or older species who have maybe gone through a similar evolutionary process that we have done on other worlds and are much older and have the ability to travel interplanetary or travel interdimensionally, etc., that are much older than obviously us as ourselves. And obviously this week, I think it is, NASA just landed a rover or probe or whatever you want to describe it as on the planet Earth. So that shows, at least from that side of things, where the technological advancement is on that side of things. Now, obviously, in our culture in ancient Africa, we have always had interactions. You look at some of the older species there, the Dogon in Mali, the Sands people. And maybe one day what we'll do, there's a video that you might want to seek out, a documentary I should say, called Cosmic Africa, and they show the comparison between some of the old world astronomy to modern day astronomy. It's called Cosmic Africa. Maybe, as I say, we'll show that DVD or one of our classes one day. We'd have to be registered on the Zoom platform for the live to Facebook to see that, just so you can see the kind of comparisons, and show that, well, this, because when a person says extraterrestrial, they think Star Trek, they think Gene Roddenberry, all this kind of stuff, Star Wars, and it's much more simple than that in its most efficient forms of how things started. However, as I say, clearly it's evolved, and whatever your level of technology is, then that's obviously how your species will be able to interact and travel. So if you are technologically advanced, where you can travel to planets by way of ships, then that's what you'll do. In the same, if you're like our ancestors are to a level where the human body can be turned into a craft, understood, then that's obviously the level of technology that you have. And so many of our things, and this is important to note, our story is recorded in our genes, you understand? So our species story of how we arrived and got here, as well as obviously how each individual is born and got here, that tells a certain type of story as well. Our story is in our genes. And even in their monotheistic Bible, what's the first name of the first book? It's Genealogy of Isis, understood? So that's, or Genesis, I should say, Genealogy of Isis, some say that it is. So that's telling a certain type of story, which we should be paying attention to, because, as I say, it's replicated in many different ways, let's say, in all of those cultures that we just spoke of, but more importantly, maybe more expressively in ancient Egypt. So as we talked about earlier, we understand that the Orion star constellation in particular plays a part in our culture. And when we're talking about Parnatharu, we are talking about suns. So let's get that 100% clear. So the manifestation of Parnatharu as it appears to us, we are talking about suns, and we happen to be the terrestrial representation of the sun. When we talk about interplanetary, so our Munthar or our Warner is also, if let's just be clear about this, no hiding the fact, that is also our galactical representative by race. The word race or Salal in the Sabaic language Yeah, really, we are all, the different races are referred to as planetary nations. Yeah, you can find that in actual facts, his story. Yeah, so we are referred to as planetary nations because we represent all of it and all universal forces, and we are the manifestation of that here on this planet. We are referred to as the all nation. Yeah, all nation, or the all race. So even when they're saying, I suppose, Black Lives Matter, then all lives matter, you could see there why actually to us they mean the same thing. You understand? Because black, everything comes out of black, which is a manifestation of all, or Pa Pa'ut. So as we represent the universe and all races as they come out, that we are referred to as the all nation. And so you have planetary nations in housing this particular location or planet, let's say, who have been developed by their extraterrestrial ancestors, who have been interpreted by modern day religions as gods. So, Parnatharu, as I say, symbol of the three flags. For those who've never seen this stuff before, that's how they were depicted in our Safaf script or hieroglyphics. And you can see here with, excuse me, you can see here with Nafar Tweetwee, an Unk en Atun, when they say Unk en Atun, you can see the extraterrestrial intervention there, and messages being received in the form of outformation, and when it comes here, it becomes information. And then we talk about beneath the seas, we say beneath formation. Then you can see here quite clearly that at the end of these rays, there are messages being sent, correct? And so here you see little unks on the end of there, and say you've got other information being expressed. As opposed to, and interesting enough, you see that closed hand of the, which you also see on the Ka'ah symbol. But you also, in some of the prayer systems, you think about the kind of stereotypes of the ancient Egyptian or whatever. You see them doing that dance with their arms at right angles and their palms facing up. So obviously that's information being sent out, and then maybe with a clasp hand, that's also information being sent and received. So the little hands on the end showing giving from this being, understand, we're being referred to as a sun or a star, but that is also our etheric ancestors, yeah. So as we would know them to be, the part of God. Now, I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but suffice to say that the perfect number is 1,000. Yeah, so 999, which represents our race, and then you have others. The Dravidians was 666, and then the Mukasu was 333. So this was symbolically, as you know, or may not know, Sabaeans are numerologists, so we're interested in the science and symbolism as it relates to numbers. We are factologists, and we deal with factual information, and we are ontologists, so we're interested in the essence of a thing or the root of other things. When we get to the cause and effect, so when we get to the root of things to find out what things really are. So here we see the perfect number at 1,000. Yeah, so 999, as you know, a hair grows out into out of the follicle into a 9, or curls into a 9. But obviously, when we were 100% ether, we didn't have hair. You understand? Or wabar, we didn't have hair. So the perfect number is 1,000, and also represents, remember, M. You see, in the Roman numerals, you get the word, let's give me the letter M, correct? And in Roman numerals, that means 1,000. M is, or EM is the word of in Sabat. EM is used when you're dealing with people. So M. M also for mother, M other. So M is also the word, the letter or the classification they use to measure the mass of stars. Understood? So it all goes back to the matriarch, yeah, the perfect unity. Is the mother who M produces other or offspring out of herself. You understand? Existence in this regard before creation. Understood? And the zeros in 1,000 represent, obviously, as you can see there, space, matter, and time, which are inseparable. You need them, obviously, for existence. So refer to it as the perfect unity, the M other, or mother in this regard, the supreme mother, matriarchal system, as I say, which we see reflected in nature. Starts female first, not no male patriarchy in that regard. So that we must first acknowledge. And let's say those zeros, as you can see there, take us back to the three sons of Razak or Risk in the 19th galaxy, and the Sirius star constellation is the bridge between the 19th and the 18th galaxy, which we reside in. Now, Hassad, the harvest. So here we see that it says, by the time surely the Adamites and their minions, I think that should be are at the end of their dominion, the harvest. Yeah, so their dominion, the harvest. So what is the dominion and what is the harvest? So let's deal with the fact that, as I say, first off, when we talk about extraterrestrialism, this is in its basic form. Yeah, we talked about panspermia in previous classes. You can go into, I think, the book, Actual Facts of Stargate for this. So we can see the as above, so below type principle. So comets, obviously, which bring in intelligent life here on Earth, able to initiate life on seed in a certain type of environment. So a special type of DNA helix structure enabling to do that, but its correlation is directly related to how the sperm hits the ovum. And when you're dealing with the sperm hitting the ovum, remember, even at that point, you're dealing with intelligent life forms, free minds here. So the sperm has a mind of its own, and when it's approaching the egg, it is seeking acceptance, which the ovum has a mind of its own in order to accept the sperm. The two of them coming together then produce a new life form, which is then a third mind. So the triad principle that we see there from space, time, and matter, you see it present again in the birthing process when it comes to the human oocyte that you're seeing here. It's the same on a planetary level, hence the word plan ET or extraterrestrial plan. So we've gone through this thousands of times. I'm exaggerating a little bit here. Many times I think you've seen these slides in our classes, but it's to remind people, you understood, and to stick this point home that your ancestors are building certain things, they're telling a certain story, and you should be asking, well, why are they doing that? Why are they putting that there? Why are they building that there? Why are they pointing that building at that star constellation? Why? Yes, we should be having interest in these things. The society doesn't want you to be interested in what's going on there in ancient Egypt. So to you to go against the system, to you to be anti-establishment, you have to find interest in ancient Africa or ancient Egypt, because they don't want you looking there. They want you kept in that dead book, the Bible and the Quran. And if we're talking in that particular way, sorry, not to offend people's religion, but we're running out of time now. You understand? There's no more time for games to be played. We have to give you the real deal for how it is. So here we see the Ben stone, or some say obelisk or techanu, showing there. And we see clearly it is a delivery device in the males, with the two-ball cane. It's a delivery device. And here pointing, as I say, to the Orion Nebula, where we understand the waters of this planet, originally came from. And here, when we look at the depiction, I suppose, showing that upright pharaoh, we clearly see that delivery device is hidden under his, badge of honor. Do you understand? As we can see there with the depiction here of Tutankhamun on the Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, you understand, which was his throne name there, and we see him standing, as I say, with his apron raised. Understood? Symbolic of, the erect phallus symbol, a delivery device, as I say, for delivering the sperm. Into the woman to meet the ovum. So this is the precursors of life in terms of us understanding extraterrestrialism is real. Now, the issue then is okay, well, going forward then, is all this Star Trek, Star Wars, and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's been designed to hype up everything so that the real, as I say, appears fake. Now, obviously, to them, it's mythology, sort of fake stories. But in your story, that's not the case. In your story, there's direct contact, so on and so forth. And now, in the modern time or modern era, too much evidence, I suppose, exists of extraterrestrial interaction, as well as the fact that human beings, in terms of their technological advancement, there are clearly been interceptions which have caused a shift in advancement, which would be, not say unnatural, but it certainly does not appear to be natural in terms of human beings. And how quickly some technologies have not even had even a foothold before the next thing, I suppose, has come out. You understand? So anyway, let's get into what this harvest is. So dominion and harvest, you see in that early sentence, in actual fact, were synonymous with each other. You understand? So meaning the same thing. So what does it mean in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, when they were given dominion or rulership? Well, one of the things, and what does harvest mean? So harvest certainly indicates, we maybe celebrated in school or whatever, harvest, which I think was around October time, I could be wrong, but the harvest festival, which was the gathering of food, correct? And so one of the things that the master teacher skillfully, I suppose, navigated through these years, having to change his name, move around a certain type of way until we were ready, I suppose, for the release of the real deal information. Well, that was the fact that the Bible as the Second Testament, the Torah as the First Testament, and the Quran as the Last Testament in terms of the monotheistic religions, dealing with the 6,000-year chronology of his story, is nothing but an extraterrestrial menu book. Let me say that again. Those books, that is nothing but an extraterrestrial menu book. So men on the menu. Yeah, God's kitchen, that's what we're talking about here. Yeah, so the dominion is speaking about the harvest, as I say, which is being spoken of here. And we see the correlation here between the Levitical priests' hat or helmet. Interesting enough, the Levitical priesthood is also synonymous with the white brotherhood, yeah, of these secret societies. We'll get into that a little bit later. And you see the chef's hat, they're wearing the same hat. Interesting enough. Now, when we look at this word dominion or radar, we in Genesis 1:26, Strong's number 7287. Interesting enough, when we look at some of the interpretations from the Gesenius Hebrew Chaldee lexicon, and when we look at the sort of definitions around 3 and 4, we see, okay, to possess oneself, that is word radar, to possess oneself of, to take possession of, as honey from a hive. So we know what how honey is produced by the workers, and then obviously we, as human beings, I suppose, take that honey and use it for food, sustenance, various different things that we use it for. But something's been produced in order then for something to be taken or removed as food. And interesting enough, in that same one, it says the Talmudists, and we know that the Mishnah and the Talmud, are the kind of writings of men about what they perceive to be the so-called holy book, the Torah, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Yes, so the Talmud is the writings of men about these books and the traditions, and they more follow those books than they do the actual so-called book they say comes from the Lord or their God or overlord. And it says it's the word used for taking bread out of the oven, this word radar. So this dominion, bread taken out of the oven, it's an interesting thing there that obviously without going into the detail now, we wouldn't see. Yeah, and so this is the mindset of that the master teacher has cultivated for the Sabaean to say, hey, let me go and look this thing up. Let me go and see what's being said. Yeah, as we would never see these things. What's it got to do with taking bread out the oven, dominion, rule, if we just took it from the English translation definition? Yeah. So again, we see here the priest's garment and clearly the chef's hat. And then we see that this word meat is used differently throughout the so-called Bible. So let's go to Psalm 78:25. And so when we look here, we see it says, "Man did eat angels' food. He sent them meat to the full." So one of the questions is, well, what is angels' food? Because don't angels eat this? Obviously, this is saying angels don't eat the same things that human beings eat. Now, one of the things about angels being depicted, obviously, in kind of modern Western iconography with wings on their back and so on and so forth, that angels live in heaven, yes, according to their mythology. And obviously they got wings on their back symbolically, because obviously those translating the time, they don't know about no spaceship and various other things like that. So as far as they can see, things that fly in the air, things that fly in the air are birds. And so the only way then that a human being can get from heaven to earth is obviously by flying with wings. Understood? Now we know those wings, even in ancient Egypt, are symbolic of crafts in certain iconography, the way they were used. Understood? But here we see it say angels have got different food. Apparently, human beings have got food, and human beings emulate angels by eating similar food to them. Now here we see that the word for food here is the word lechem. Yes? And what we find throughout the Bible is there's a lot of technology going on with the translators and so on and so forth, where the word bread and this word meat, lechem, are used oftentimes interchangeably. Yes. So let's look at a few quotes here. So we see here in Genesis 25:34 that it says, let's go from 27, it says, "And the boys saw Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man dwelling in tents." So, you don't hunt vegetables. So clearly, at this point, Esau is, you understand, obviously hunting, and the second verse confirms that he likes to eat meat. And if he's not important, then why mention it? So 25:28. So, "And Isaac loved Esau because he did eat of his venison meat, yeah, but Rebekah loved Jacob. And Jacob sawed pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was faint." So pottage is like a stew or a soup, understood? And which some say is mainly vegetable based, yeah. But interestingly thing here is that when we read on, it says, "And Esau said to Jacob, Feed me, I pray thee, that same red pottage, for I am faint." Therefore his name was called Edom. So the issue is, well, how did he get the stew become red? You understand? Because, and the reality is, or the reason is because it was a blood stew. You understand? And if you look this up in Africa, you can see in many cultures invaded in Africa, one might say, there's a blood type of stew, you understand, which is made from the blood of animals and mixed with other things, you understand, meat and veg as well. Now some say, well, the pottage is lentils, you understand, and we do have red lentils, but red lentils, when they're cooked, turn yellow. So if it's lentils, then there's no point in mentioning the fact it's red, because it's a red stew. You understand? So they were meat eaters. Yeah. So it says, "Jacob, sell me this." So he sold his birthright. Obviously, he's not that intelligent, but he sold his birthright because he was hungry for this red stew. Obviously, he then got the name Edom. Yeah, red or ruddy, which means red or ruddy. You see here, bread of pottage of lentils he did eat, so on and so forth. But he gave up his birthright for food. Now, as I say, we see that the word here for bread, we see here the word, but in the other The translation was translated as food, correct? Now we see it here, 3899, as lechem, yes, as bread. So there it was food. They didn't describe the type of food, but when you went further, it said, well, it was meat in the previous verse, 78:25. You see this same word, lechem, is the word for bread. Yeah. Now, Genesis 18, chapter 18, gives you a story which some again are familiar with, and we see the word bread again. And we see that the Lord, so the Lord himself, you understand, appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat at the tent of the door in the heat of the day. So the Lord, all seeing, all knowing, according to what they teach, all seeing, all knowing, omnipresent, but he can move from one place to another. If you're omnipresent, you cannot have motion because you're existing in all places, all time, existing everywhere. So you can't move from point A to B because you're already there. So obviously their interpretation of what is taking place and not understanding that the different terms are a hierarchy of, let's get it clear, extraterrestrials, overstood, who are interacting with different human beings, and within that they have a hierarchy. God, Lord God. Even the term Elijah is a hierarchical term, because Lord God is Yahuwah Elohim, and then when you say Elijah, it's codified for reversing that and saying Elohim Yahuwah, Eli, and then the Yah bit is put together. Elohim Yahuwah, shorthand. And that basically means the difference between a being who is from above, coming down, let's say in a spaceship or beaming in and appearing on Earth, versus somebody who is extraterrestrial in nature but born through the womb of a woman. So when it's an Elijah, that is an extraterrestrial entity being born through the womb of a woman, versus in reverse, Yahuwah Elohim, which is, let's say, someone coming in extraterrestrial, but they're not coming through the womb of a woman. They're, to say, either manifesting or coming down in some kind of craft or ship. Now, here we see that, as I say, these extraterrestrials come now and they see Abraham, as far as so he obviously knew them, he can see them physically, he can touch them, and his first reaction is to give them some food. That's his first reaction. Wash yourself, hey, come, and treat them as guests to be able to sit down. So they obviously had legs, they had arms, they had buttocks to be able to sit down, understood? And he was able to interact with them and see with them. They were not spooks or spirits. They were in humanoid form. Now, what did he decide to eat them? Did he decide to give them vegetables? Did he decide to give them, the Dr. Sabi diet? Did he decide to, which is the optimum diet? Did he decide to give them, alkaline water? Did he decide to give them all these things that we're saying are the optimum stuff to give? He didn't do that. He gave them, he said, a calf. Calf. That's what he went to get, a calf. Meat. That's what he decided to do. Freshly, a fresh calf. That's what he went to get. And as it says here, he took butter, 18:8. He took butter and milk and calf, and he dressed it and set before them, and he stood by them under the tree, and they did eat. So they like meat. Understood? And as we see here, that word lechem is being shown again. Now, interesting enough, look now. All of a sudden, it's lehem, but it's not lechem. They're being shown here in terms of the English transliteration of the word here. So this is where you start. It's the same concordance number, but you start seeing the game start to be played now with the wording. Now, why would that be the case? Because when you look at the word Bethlehem, you're not seeing it as the same word lechem, which is tying into angel's food, which we now see from 18. Angel's food is meat. Even from 78:25, it shows you that meat was also there and offered, you understand? Which I think is a word. In fact, we'll get into that. But meat was offered. Yeah. Now, when we look at the pronunciation, we do see this word lechem there, but we're not seeing it in Lehem. So you're saying Bethlehem, so that you don't make the connection. Wow, this word Bethlehem that we seen from our little nativity play and all that kind of stuff, it means the house of bread. The house of bread, which is angels' food. And what is angels' food? Angels' food is meat. It gives a new meaning or new thinking. Now the master teachers opened your eyes when they say, give us this day our daily. What is being spoken about? Because bread now can mean bread, like loaf of bread. It can mean, now when they say bun in the oven in England, I don't know if it's a term they use in the States for all our stateside listeners, but they say bun in the oven, yes, is when a woman is what? Slang for when a woman is pregnant. They say bun in the oven. Now, why would bread be associated with, a woman's pregnancy? Okay, somewhere along the line, someone's made this link between these two items. You understand? It also can relate to money, as we understand, in terms of some of the symbolism, slang, I should say, in some of the definitions. Let's explore this further now. So, house of bread, we see there as the birthplace of the Savior. Now, interesting enough, they were originally in Genesis, isn't it? They were dealing with a group of individuals, yeah? So, because the word Elohim or God in Genesis 1:1, which is Elohim, the I am is equivalent to the English F, yeah? The Yod and the Mim is equivalent to the English F. But by the time they get down to Genesis 4, isn't it, dealing with one individual, just the Lord. And that Lord is the same person you find in Ezekiel 8:14, which is Tammuz. You understand? One who was placed over them, at least in the Sumerian doctrine. The word Tammuz means harvest. Don't believe me? Go and check it and look it up. The word Tammuz means harvest. So is that giving it? So you got a job, right? And your name is your job title. Obviously, in these particular instances, your name is your job. So he was in charge of the what? The harvest. Now, let's look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 29. Yeah, so we get a distinction, isn't it? Because we see meat or lechem, bread and meat. We see that means red meat and different types of meat, as we know meat to be. Here then it says, and God said, behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, and in which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed, it to you it shall be for meat. So, and they use the word okla there. You understand? Use the word okla. Let's just jump in. Okla here, and here we see that the word okla meaning food, yeah, food eating, object of devouring, consuming by wild beasts in fire of judgment. Yeah, so food of wild beasts, food of fire. You understand? So maybe implying that certain things are cooked, but food of fire. Yeah, so we see the word okla here, which is being used differently. So, as I say, interestingly enough, let's just get back to where we were. So, interestingly enough, it's saying that, well, it's going to be for you as meat. So, the comparison of food, so if you're reading it just in English, you're going to see, well, you're going to eat vegetables as if it's like you're eating meat. Obviously, we see here that the word okla there is describing the act of eating. Yes? So we see another translation, let's say, of the word meat being used interchangeably with various things. Now, we said adrenaline season, I think, one of our opening credits. And we explained that in a previous class because obviously the secretion of adrenaline, so let's get it clear. You understand? So human beings, the gods or these extraterrestrials that they were dealing with, obviously liked meat, and it can be animal meat and it can be human meat. Hence the interesting correlation that when we talk about menu and we talk about men, yes, it's the same word in the ancient language, like Sabat, for example. When you put a U at the end, it pluralizes it. Now, men is already considered to be plural, but menu, it just means like men, so it would be multiples, yeah, of the same thing, equivalent to the English S. But here, why do we say adrenaline season? Well, because these Levitical priests, who we saw earlier wearing the hat of the chef, when you read Malachi and the full book of Malachi, Malachi is attacking these individuals, the Levitical priesthood. He's getting at them because of certain of their behavior. In a sense, speaking to them directly. And when we look at the end of Malachi chapter 2, it says, "Ye have wearied the Lord with your words. Yet ye say," so this is them speaking, "wherein have we wearied him? When ye say," so when you tell us, your others of your kind, yeah, extraterrestrials, because he's obviously getting at them to move away from this type of behavior. Yeah, he's getting at them for it. Yeah, certain of the group we understand of those Anunnaki, remember, moved from disagreeable to agreeable. Understood? Yes, so we see here he's saying, yeah, ye have wearied the Lord with your words. Yet you say, wherein have we wearied him? When ye say, everyone that doeth evil is good in the sight of the Lord, and he that delighteth in them, where is the God of judgment? So to do evil is good. And we understand the purpose is because human beings secreting adrenaline to certain types of extraterrestrials, Draconian had devolved to a level where not only were they eating meat, but they derived energy from the meat. And in order to derive a certain type of energy from it, they needed human beings to do adverse acts. So us in stressful situations, in stressful conditions, causes us to secrete adrenaline, which seasons the meat. Yeah, or they like white meat, but obviously, dark meat is on the menu if we behave like white meat. So here we can see they have us doing, well, they have them at least in terms of their chefs, yeah, the evil or wrongdoing is right in the sight. Now, the reality is when you look at our television today, you think about how many programs and things are designed to kind of get you in a stressed out state. So we see a lot of programs about murder. We see a lot of programs about adultery, keeping secrets, all this type of different things. We see a lot of sports where you're supposed to be on one side versus another side. And if your team loses, it makes you sad. You know what I mean? If your team wins, it makes you happy. If your team's losing or people are not playing right, or certain players not playing right, you get stressed out. You know what I mean? If you're really into it emotionally. So there are many things. You understand? If you haven't got money, then they're showing you about bailiffs, can't pay, take it away. All these different types of things to make you fearful. Understood? In those situations, or create fear or fear type environment, which has you, as I say, secreting, as part of your fight or flight response, has you secreting adrenaline, keeping you in a stressed out state, which, as I say, they love the taste of. You understand? So this is where we're seeing these things, but we didn't see them. Yeah? They were there right in front of our eyes, but we didn't see them because we didn't have the knowledge or the know-how of the context of what was taking place. Yeah, until, as I say, the master teacher came along. And so you saw two different approaches there. One, arguably, where they saw meat as vegetables, and then another side, clearly, where meat is as we know it to be meat, red meat, angels' food. Yeah, and so this dual nature, because of those who don't understand, obviously, who is sitting behind these titles and seats. Yeah, so in the Roman mythology, you get this Janus picture, isn't it? Yeah, two beings, the one being, with the two faces. And we understand that to be is because what you had was two different ideologies. You had Enki, Nudimud, one of the brothers there, and you had Nunamir or Enlil as the other brother there. You understand? So, and as this became, as I say, Enlil in charge of the cherubim, and then Enki in charge of the seraphim, as perceived to be good and bad angels. Obviously, on that side, it's all negative to us, or not part of our culture in that regard. But we're going to get into Enki mixing in a bit later. So you're getting two different ideologies, or self-destruction, self-preservation, two different ideologies here. And one, particularly Enki, he didn't respect human beings in that regard, and certainly didn't respect the mixing in or the binding of extraterrestrial genes, or his form of extraterrestrials, with human genes. So it was excuse my French, but bastardization of their race in that regard. So you got two different ideologies, but obviously them seeing human beings as food, workers, but also we can eat you as well. So if there's an excess amount of you, consumers, an excess amount of you, then we'll eat you, and we'll do with the producers. So we need producers and we need consumers. Understood? Yeah. Useless eaters, as we see, or as we sometimes refer to as or called. Now, John 4:34, it says, Jesus said unto them, my meat is to do the will of him that sent me, and to finish his work. So, interesting enough. And then it says, say not ye, there are yet 4 months, then cometh harvest. Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, for they are white, already to harvest. I mean, do I need to say any more? That's a wow. Yeah, for those who ain't seen that before. Yeah, they are white, already to harvest. And so we constantly putting ourselves in to the mix. You understand? Though the more Adam or the Adamites, remember the word Adam, same like the word Edom, the vowels are slightly changed there, is the same word. It means red and ruddy. Red and ruddy. Yeah? So it's not pertaining to us. We've been around a lot longer than 6,000 years. Yeah? So 3761 BC is talking about the creation of the Adamites. It's their story, his story. Yeah. So here, the word for meat that they're using is broma. Yeah, in Greek, broma. Now, interesting enough, the master teacher, in terms of trying to teach us Negroes to become Sabians, as part of the resurrection, told us to stop calling each other bro, and to use the proper name and full title, you understand, of when we're speaking to each other, which we still don't do. We take our slang and we convert it into the language that we're speaking today, it's Semitic. So we don't listening, we always modify if we think it's too difficult. That's what we do as Nagarnad, you understand? We modify. Yeah, so instead of calling each other, we don't say bro, but we call each other Zamau instead of using the person's proper name, which over time, if we were to do it, because we're not supposed to shorten it, it's supposed to say it in full, eventually it'll become more natural and normal to us, and then we would get the tones. And also make sure that people are remembered, at least in their highest state, of one of their names that they use with the masses. Imagine now you need to call upon somebody for help or assistance. Maybe they're familiar with a certain situation, or you understand, you were close, so now they're on the other side, they can assist you. So you use your Salafu, maybe your grandmother who's passed away, call such and such, man, I'm struggling with da 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 da, get him to help me in this situation, but you don't know their name. Either you knew their English name or you knew part of their Sabaean name. Now, how many people are referred to as Hara, or how many people have got the name Amun, or how many people have got the name Atun? So you need the right combination. So we should be taking the time out, because it's a bit more work, isn't it, to type out, especially if you're typing on whatever these various different platforms, type out the person's name so people don't know, I don't know the name, so I'll just use Zamal or Zamal Tat or whatever the case may be, instead of learning the person's full name. And saying it's more work, but it's the right type of work, because after a while it becomes Hara Habab Jadef Raye Hatap Tatep En Raye Amun Sanan Atum Raye Ma'aka Raye. Is that the Bab Kak Nihes? I mean, second Sacham Raye. After a while, it becomes normalized. It doesn't feel like so much of a thing. But as I say, we need to stop modifying and master what the master teacher has given us. In the sense that it helps aid our transformation. Whilst it may appear difficult to do, practice. Practice helps to leads to perfection. Not makes perfection, leads to perfection in our journey or continuing to perfect ourselves. Understood? So we should use names. Now, you don't know, interesting enough, bro could be short for brother, or somebody could be saying, yeah, how you doing, bro? And it could be short for food in Greek. Yeah, what we're seeing here, I suppose maybe you know the difference if somebody starts, yeah, how you doing, bro? And you know what I mean, somebody starts now pouring salt over you with a little bit of pepper, then you obviously know what type of bro it is. You know what I mean? Yeah, what you doing, bro? But no, you the bro. You the food. You understand? So the situation is that certain words have meanings and connotations connected and linked to them. And so sometimes we are taught to elevate above us, to stop using it to aid our transformation, cause a separation, as I say, in the way in which we do things. Any questions?
I have, there's a couple of questions here. This is from Alexandra, and they say, at what stage did we lose our higher senses?
So basically, when you're talking about the higher senses, so we were maimed under a project called Project 24, which was basically the separation or the change of us going from hermaphrodites and hermaphrodites, so neutral gender beings, into being separated into what we call male and female species. So the maiming obviously took place in order because the mind state of those individuals was necessarily not ready to be as those deities, or they potentially, with the mixed genetics, could potentially overthrow them as a species. So therefore it was considered to be dangerous, because we were taught a methodology of self-preservation. This is what was originally conveyed to us, and that was certain principles that we lived by. But the interaction with the genes, with the Anunnaki, introduced a more of a self-destructive mentality. So as a defense mechanism, that Barafari gland was removed. The nerve endings were there. It was in the hippocampus area of the brain and worked with the tonsils and the appendix. So it was removed in this last epoch, which is a 50,000 year cycle. Next question. Which is to be replaced, but it won't be replaced in the hippocampus area. Is too dangerous an operation. It will be replaced in the submental, which is the area below the chin, which is connected to the brain.
I'll see no further questions.
Okay. No.
Nabab Kaknihes, your mic appears to be muted.
Oh no, what a waste. What a waste. Okay, so, yeah, because I just missed all that part. So, therefore, Tawatak, so, Theremos, yes, so here we see that the word Theremos, harvest, yes, so the act of reaping, yeah? Say they're gathering men into the kingdom of God. So it brings a new kind of meaning, really, into the word in which we're looking at some of these words here. And if it sounds strange what we're talking about here, then read Revelations chapter 19. Yeah, you don't believe what this is saying, we'll go and read Revelation chapter 19, where it talks about the supper of the great God, yeah, and who they're going to be eating. Yeah, these individuals with wings flying down, understood, yeah, to gather up this harvest that they're coming to collect. So the reality of the situation is that many years ago the master teacher was speaking on the land, giving a lecture, and he said the most varying, so different types of documentaries being made about the same subject was about food, yes, and ancient Egypt. Now, that flew probably over most people's heads at that particular time in terms of what was being conveyed, understood. So we see ancient Egypt being hidden from us, but now obviously the kind of true purpose and why there's an obsession with food, almost, in some which you don't kind of see really in the animal kingdom in a similar sort of way. Obviously human beings have taken things in a much more sophisticated in our approach than a lot of animals on the surface of the planet Earth. However, there is an obsession with food, different type of food programs, so on and so forth. So you're seeing multiple documentaries. So the obsession with food, is it now because you are food? And maybe now when you've looked on those walls and you've seen, wow, this is really our story. This is what we were created to be. This was our purpose. Obviously, you're not happy with that. So you want to rewrite history. Rewrite it, or you don't really want the truth of who and what you are and why you were created to come out. Yeah, about the true nature of your overlords, these meat-eating individuals. So, now, there's a number of things in this early part of this book, or actual master secret, actual facts, excuse me. So there should be a correction there, actual facts. So in this, which is making points about things that we as individuals should know. So when you see the word, you must understand, what does it mean? Yeah, this is something that you all need to know. So pay attention. You understand? Clearly, there has been various different events that have taken place. And what the master is explaining to us is that we have to be cognizant of what's taken place in the past, what's behind us, obviously what's present, and then what is to come, what is in front of us. And being the Parmunthar for the Nagarnadu, yeah, the warner for the Negroid race, insofar as that we are being given certain things well ahead and well in advance of time in order to prepare us for the day and times that we find ourselves in. But oftentimes, instead of us to take the slow race of preparation, we like to work with extremes. So we always want to be reactionary, when in actuality, the way we've been given certain things ahead of time, understand, it was so that we would be prepared for the day and time we're in. So, as I say, him being removed from us, or the master teachers, our warner being removed for 18 years, has obviously had a significant adverse impact in terms of the let's get that word. Preparation. Let's say we'll say that. I can't get preparatory out of my mouth. But we get the preparation that was necessary for us to be prepared for the day and time that we are in. Understood. Even though, as I say, he's done his best to convey what was necessary, being, as I say, a victim, or us being a victim of COINTELPRO and other things, because they know, well, get this leader away, get him off the streets, get him away from his people, because he's that guy. He's one of the one that we were expecting, which is what COINTELPRO was designed for. remember, it wasn't just about intercepting or going undercover in black organizations. What was it originally for? Remember, it was to stop the rise of a black messiah. That's what it was done for or designed for. So you've got a political organization with a spiritual agenda. Understand? So we may not be identifying with certain prophecies, but as I showed you in that kind of movie Indiana Jones, certain people have been interested in going around the world and looking at various different artifacts and things and seeing, well, what the hell is going to be taking place in the world going forward? Yeah, because history, one of the things about history is it tends to repeat itself, especially if you've got human beings within the same environments and understanding that things work in cycles. Yeah, and this is something that we should understand. We're moving in this day and time from what they refer to as linear progression to cyclical evolution. Understood? And so even the way in which we're learning this doctrine, you can see it's a cyclical evolution. You're learning the same things that were being taught in 1963, but it's now given to you on a higher levels. If somebody was walking, for example, on a spiral staircase, they're walking in the same direction, correct? But the more you walk, you're in the same kind of cycle, but now instead of being on ground floor, now you're on floor number 4. So you've elevated to a higher level. So the same things you're learning, but on a higher state, understood? As opposed to understanding things from A, B, C, D in that kind of sequential fashion. That learning for us now is dead. You understand? And we're going now in a cyclical state of mind, which you have to get back into, which is why certain things tend to get repeated, but you're now getting more of the how it should be, our story, if you want to call it story, or the actual facts, yeah, and the master's secrets now to be uncovered to help aid and transform you from mortals back into deities again. So this you must understand, yeah. Muthyad Mutatalu, extraterrestrial alien plots, projects, plans here on planet Earth. This is what we must understand, yeah, in terms of what is necessary for us in this day and time. And so we have to understand there's many different types of aliens or extraterrestrials that have arrived here, came here for different reasons, different purposes. You understand? And this is a very rich planet in terms of resources, etc. And it's taken trillions of years of what you would call evolution or growth to get to this point. And not all planets in various different solar systems are life-sustaining. And I've shown you in previous classes, our universe, which comes from a dual verse, which comes from a trial verse, and on into the multiverses, is a massive place, unimaginable to us in this current state, our physical state. So there's a vast amount or array, you understand, of existence. Up to 100 billion galaxies of different types exist within existence. So vast amount of space. So there's a lot of space and a lot of life that can progress and grow within the environment which Panatharu manage and look after as those overseers. You understand? Now, excuse me. So it's very clear that coming here, at least, extraterrestrials were coming in for different reasons, and they don't all get along with each other. You understand? So, contrary to the childlike beliefs that we find in the monotheistic religion, that when a person dies, for example, and goes to heaven, that there's going to be, take the Jehovah's Witness, for example, you're going to be sitting around in some place where lions are not dangerous. Other wild animals, they're not dangerous anymore. You can hug them like pets and so on and so forth. You're going to be fed grapes and other different bits and pieces. People are serving you. You don't really have to work no more. You can just be chilling, meet your parents and your elders and so on and so forth. Well, who's serving you in this particular instance? Because if somebody's serving you like the angels are waiting on you hand and foot, well, eventually, as we know from history, they're going to get peed off. Understand? Maybe they start overthrowing human beings in this so-called perfect paradise or this environment that they give you this impression that it's supposed to be. But if it was so perfect and so wonderful and so peaceful and tranquil, then why is there war in heaven? There was a war, according to what they're teaching us. There was a war. So people don't get along. Yeah, in this vastness of space. So let's put away the childish interpretations of Revelation chapter 12:7. There was a war, correct? So let's put away some of these childish interpretations. And when we think about the wider universe, and like ourselves, with various different planetary nations, but we haven't got to the point yet because of racism and other different isms where we're working as one planet in the vastness of the solar system in the context of the galaxy or whatever. You've got different extraterrestrials, as I say, coming here for various different reasons. Now, interestingly, when you look at the Bible, particularly Job 9:9, we find out that here we're introduced to 3 different constellations. So we talk about Arcturus, Orion, and Pleiades. And in the Quran, sort of 53:49, so 53:49, we see that Sirius is mentioned there again, Yusuf Ali translation there. So this connection to these particular star constellations and why they were put in there was simply because these extraterrestrials are overlords in interception or inspiring these various different books, have put their locations where they came from in these books. As I say, there are 100 million stars in the Milky Way galaxy alone. So the question is, why those particular constellations? So we look at different types of extraterrestrials shown in their Bible. So we see the Anakim, also known as the Anunnaki, which means those who Anu sent to Earth in 50s, Anunnaki, but they're the Anakim of your Bible, the next, and we see that they're shapeshifters. We see that the Pleiadians are pale fur, skin, and eyes, so white skin or transparent skin, and white eyes because where they came from. Excuse me. In Pleiades, they were not close to the sun. Yeah, so a different type of humanoid structure was then appropriate for the location where they were in. We see beings from Aldebaran as humanoids and Draconians as reptilians. I mean, saying reptilians as well, note that generally speaking, when you're using that term, you're talking about people from the Draco or humanoids from the Draco star constellation. Understood? So we have a combination of various different extraterrestrials in their Bible. It's not including all of the references that we understand from our own Egyptian story, that you find all the way throughout their Bible as well, which you learn about in books like Jesus Found in Egypt, Luciferian Conspiracy, and The Beginning. So this is talking about, as I say, extraterrestrials on the side, obviously, who are responsible for the creation of the Adamites. So we see when we go a bit more deeper, we're interested in these, specifically about these Pleiadians, yeah, so the Mukmeyu, yeah, and as I say, Job 9:9, we see Pleiades mentioned in there, yeah, as one of the representative of one of these star systems where these extraterrestrials of the so-called monotheistic religions have been involved in. We see there that when we look into the etymology, Pleiades is Kima, you understand? So we see it there, and a constellation of 7 stars. I mean, that comes from the root Kumaz, yeah, and we understand that to mean, yeah, this group of or cluster of 7 stars, or to store away, yes, these ornaments or these 7 stars in terms of that constellation, let's say where they came from. Now, here we see of Kumaz there in the context with Kima, and so we've got Pleiades, Pleiadians, and also Syrians, by way of Sirius. Now, we understand that the Lord God here is showing as a sun or a star, which we mentioned earlier about the Parnatharu as one of our interpretation, but you see that the gods are being shown as suns. There are stars or star constellations, and how confusion has arisen, as I say, in many of the monotheistic religions, particularly with the so-called Hebrews or Judahites, who basically, where planets were named after people, or you name a street or you name a building or something after people, and then after time, you understand? So, for example, as we've said many times in this class, Venus obviously can be the god of love. It's considered to be the god of love, and that anthropomorphically is a woman. You understand? But it's symbolic of a planet. Now, if over time, yeah, you forget, hey, this really means the planet. It's not talking about a woman. And then when you're writing about there, for those who don't know, hundreds, thousands of years later, they forget. Now they think Venus is a real person. It's not making reference to the planet of Venus, originally named afterwards. This is where the confusion can come in. So now you're thinking, okay, this woman had 12 sons. You understand? When it's actually talking about star constellations, it's not talking about people. You understand? And this is where the confusion has come in the Bible, whereas we understand fully how star constellations are named or associated with individuals or people who have made a significant impact in our culture or in our way of life, and therefore they get star constellations named after them or associated with their name. Now, it makes more sense for us because we are a terrestrial form of a star. You understand? Hence, we have a soul, two types: the Rawu soul, breathe in oxygen, breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide, the lit fire inside, and we have the Ba'h soul, which is the expressional being. So we have two aspects of self. We are burning black, understood, by way of the fact that we are breathing or taking in and having the ability to process ether. Yes, so we are sons, hence why we were naming sons. It came from our culture, but as I say, it's been misinterpreted and misunderstood, and now today the world is dealing with a 16th century interpretation of those books, without the, as I say, modern day interpretations and technological advancements that we find ourselves enjoying today to aid our understanding. So these same Pleiadians, it says, but ye have borne tabernacle of your Moloch and Chion of your images, the star of your God, which ye made unto yourselves. Acts 7:43. Yea, ye took up the tabernacle of Moloch and the star of your God, Remphan figures, which ye made to worship them, and I will carry you away beyond Babylon. So again, it's associating these groups of individuals or extraterrestrials with stars. In this particular instance, those stars, when they come down here, obviously become Extra-Terra Astral in nature. Yeah, and so this is why it's being mentioned in those books. So the 7 star constellations, so it's on the screen, let me just correct that. Let's get rid of it. Can't see. Let's put that back up there. So we see those 7 stars of Pleiades. We can now see actually this has found itself into various different religious iconography. Understand? You may associate this with the Jewish 6-pointed star or whatever the case may be. Yes. But it relates to these 7 constellations, obviously, and the one in the middle there, 7 stars, correct? And here, which we probably get into in today's part 2, the 7 birth mothers of the Anunnaki. So in the secondary project where we talked about earlier, based on, I think, Sir Tet's question, and they came back, isn't it, again, with now the working together with the Anunnaki, the Pleiadians, and then they used or wanted to create, as I say, a new hybrid being in their image and after their likeness, but using the original, kinsman hybrid that they created didn't work, so they had to go to Africa now and use the genes of the Sands people, obviously, and the Wathabi in the Sand or Watusi, obviously, to get the genes and system to work. So they went to Africa, took the genes there, and then moved them over to Arabia to restart that project. Understood? Called the Adama Project, which produced the Muadamu, and then later down the line, so that was the obviously the white race. Then on obviously into the Canaanites, we get which was the red and ruddy race, in initially, and then you get the Canaanites later down the line in house with the disease of leproma or leprosy, and that becomes the white race. Both of them hybrids. Understood? So these are 7 birth mothers, which obviously in their mythology they have turned into obviously the 7 sisters of Pleiades. Understood? So now, which many of you I think on the phone are familiar with, who's familiar with the doctrine anyway, but see here, as I say, that the presence of extraterrestrials interacting with modern day government is nothing new. You understand? And certainly interacting in various points within some of the older civilizations which have lived is nothing new. The interpretation of it, however, has been well hidden from the world. But obviously, we're in a day and time now where many of the things that the Master Teacher spoke about in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, into the new millennium, are now being confirmed on the Science Channel, in the History Channel, Discovery, so on and so forth. You understand? Which at one time the Master Teacher appeared crazy, and you appeared crazy when you used to talk about it. Now, certain terminology. Now people are familiar with Nibiru. They're familiar with Rilo 7 and different types of terms, and even various different projects. But at that time, when he's teaching in the 70s and the 80s, I mean, you sounded crazy back then. And even to some now, even today, sound crazy. But you have to get over that embarrassment and shame, as we've expressed earlier. Yeah, our culture starts off and deals with star information, cosmology, etc. That is part of and who we are in terms of our culture. So enjoy it, or make yourself comfortable with it, to know that your ancient Egyptian, the Kadem Muhammadu, they understood that and built monuments that are considered to be wonders of the world today, aligned with certain star constellations for a reason. And so explore that, because he doesn't want you to do that. So here, as I say, their contact with these Kamatu Pleiadians out of Genesis, Job 9:9, excuse me, and these various different bloodlines, which are the bloodlines, interesting enough, of them as extraterrestrials. We'll get into this, the RH negative bloodlines. George Washington, as we know, left many clues, as I say, in his works, writings, vision to see certain extraterrestrials. And even here we see in the this Masonic painting of George Washington, we see here quite clearly Pleiades in the back, so the 7-star system there, constellation that we see there. And if we notice very carefully, and some of you will be familiar with this already, we see a ladder, if you can see it in the back, and that ladder is leading up to a spacecraft. Yeah, synonymous with Jacob's ladder. So they're in touch with their extraterrestrials, and then we see even certain monuments like the obelisk in Washington, etc., is pointing or aligned with the Pleiades star constellation. So they're quite freely, understand, interacting with their extraterrestrial overlords, who human beings have interpreted as gods, deities, so on and so forth, but are just beings with higher knowledge who have been responsible for, in this particular case, forming certain species of human beings on the planet Earth based off the original, formulating planetary nations. So any other questions? I'll move on.
We have a question from it was somebody asking about the sound, but I think the sound is fine. Let's have a look. There are no open questions apart from somebody asking about the sound, but I don't hear any issues with it at all.
Okay, thank you for that. So, one thing, so there's various different symbolism around the world. I think we've shown this before as well in some detail, and we're going to go and explore this as we step more further in. So this is a series, I think it's called Falling Skies. You can see there's season 4 Exodus, where they use this symbol here. You see the 3 interlocking circles, And this is talking about these three groups, the Celtics, the Celtics, and the Celtics. Again, it's a symbol of the Pleiadian star system. So a lot of the time, unless you're in the know, there are symbols being used in the world, produced oftentimes by certain secret societies who have connections to these extraterrestrials, and sometimes extraterrestrials are utilizing these societies to execute their plan ET, you understood, here on Earth as we would have it, Mapa. And this is one of those instances. So it relates obviously back to when these Pleiadians came here and interacted with certain, as I say, simian life forms. And we'll get into that a bit further. So what you've got to remember, sometimes with the TV, they're teaching their own people about their beginning, but obviously in their way, myth, legend, mythology, so on and so forth. So they're giving them certain information about that. And so it's an interesting series, not that we relate everything that we're saying back to this doctrine on TV programs, but it's an interesting series. The reason why I say that is because of the different type of categories of extraterrestrials that they're showing. Sometimes things appear more real because there's some element of truth behind the fiction, understood. So we can see it relating to different types of shaggies. I'm going to leave this because we're going to get into that in a bit further along in the session today. Yeah, so it's 3 interlocking circles in that regard. So we need to understand a bit about time. So there's different classifications of time. So different classifications of time, and so that they have in terms of sort of looking at history and prehistory, not necessarily so much to do with us, but to do with how they want to classify how they've come about, and their relationship to history when they started, I suppose, to write things down. They're looking backwards, and obviously you've got various different sciences, earth sciences, I suppose, archaeology, paleontology, look at different things based on that we have buried or have been covered up, understood. So here we see about the Pleistocene era, and it says the name given to geologists for the lower division of the Quaternary, now reckoned as about from 2.6 million years ago, essentially pertaining to the glacial era. So they're relating it back to the Ice Age, and you have a epoch, the word epoch, which means a new period of time. And so when you're looking at, for example, the Genesis so-called story, and it is a story, but and obviously it's been copied from different events. The 7 so-called periods or 7 days are synonymous with 7 periods of 7,000 years. And those days, so they use a Hebrew word yom there to mean day or period of time. It's synonymous with 7,000 years. You understand? So the 7 times the 7 days. Obviously, we know God rests on the 7th day according to their teachings. But obviously, it was a start, obviously, of a certain project. And as we know, as I say, the 49, 4 plus 9 equals 13, symbolic of the 13th hour, which was the completion of their project. So you have to understand, it's got nothing to do with us as Nagar Nadu. It is to do with the creation of the Mukasu or the Adamites 6,000 years ago. But obviously, part of their project and various different hybrids were created, clearly, obviously, leading up to them, as I say, taking some of those hybrids and reutilizing them to create a new being called the Adamite or Wu-Sabat tongue. So let's understand about some of these eras. So we've got various terms being used from eon to epoch. And when we talk about the Pleistocene, excuse me if that's not the right pronunciation, but Pleistocene era, then obviously we see it here within the Cenozoic era. So this is the era Quaternary, you understand, and then we see the Pleistocene epoch period there. Now here on the side, to understand how to read this, obviously here you see modern, and this is older. So here we see the term Ka, which is I believe is kilo annum. So it's a shorthand basically for saying years. Obviously times this by 1,000, and then you would get the amount of years that they're talking about in relation to days. I think if my math serves me correctly, it's always a dangerous thing to do that live. But I think it's 110,000. Yeah, or was it 100? Let's go move those. 1, 2, 3. It's a bit something like 118,000. I think. Yeah, if we move the decimal point 3 places to the right. So yeah, in relation to how long these periods are. So again, 66. So this again is milli-annum or something of that nature. I think it's milli-annum. Yeah. So again, here this is millions. So years. Yeah, shorthand. Millions. Yeah, and then giga is then billions. Yeah, so you read the shorthand in terms of the way they've classified these different eras. Yeah, so timesing it by 1 million, obviously, to get what you need there, and 1,000 in this instance. Yeah, so here on verse 11, saying that the Pleistocene, it designated the Cenozoic era. Yeah, so we understand what that means now. Yes, Zoic means recent, and sorry, Cenozoic means recent, and Zoic means ice. Yes, so Ceno meaning recent, and so it was designated the geological era. And so when it's talking about recent, and here, sorry, let me go back to here, the etymology, most recent, what it's making reference to there is the most recent visit from these extraterrestrials. You understand? So this is what this, the hidden meaning, I suppose, behind the words mean, is the recent visit from these extraterrestrials, intervening, intercepting, say, the development of certain life forms here on the planet Earth. So it says, so it was designating the geologic era that includes the present, during which the various mammals have developed, and the humanoids, such as the dinosaur, who were related to the aliens of Wu-Sabat, Nadam, the Draco star system. So, as I say, we've got various interceptions here, and obviously we talk about Homosaurus. Yeah, so on the planet Earth, and so we've got various different things in relation to Homosaurus and how Homosaurus came about. Now, there's various books that have spoken about this, and so you can see one of them there on the screen we put up for you, Is Jesus God? Which talks about or introduces Stenococcosaurus or Trudon, as is showing here, about obviously you've got naturally evolving out of the waters dinosaurs, or out of the waters. And so remember, in the Holy Tablets, it's page 81, you talk about diapsids and cyanapsids. So diapsids were more aggressive, so having 2 holes in the brain, and through this line you get the kind of modern day reptilians here on Earth, and then you have the opposing to that is cyanapsids, which were less aggressive, much more passive, 1 hole in the skull, so excluding the eyes. So remember, dianapsids, 2 holes in the sky in the skull, understood, so leading to reptilian development here on Earth. And then out of that you have cyanapsids, which is leading to develop 1 hole in the skull, excluding the eyes, and that leads to mammalian or proto-mammal development out of the reptilian line or species, so much more passive in nature, and leading obviously to mammalian development on that side. Now, various extraterrestrials have come along and, as I say, intercepted some of these genes. And as I say, this is a example we can see here, Stenococcosaurus, Stenococcosaurus, or Trudon, as I say, of dinosaurs mixing with ETs to create an upright standing, so bipedal humanoid, understand, which is being expressed in that book, as I say, Is God an Extraterrestrial? But listen, this is over 30 years ago, yeah? Over 30 years ago, showing how all these things different connect. So class by the master teacher.
Moving creatures that have life, right? So that means he placed in these creatures the seed to reproduce life. Evolution is mentioned by that statement, that have life. Once you say creatures, you know they're alive, but that have life. And fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. That's the firmament between the earth planet and the spheres. That's the firmament, okay? Yeah. And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth. You see that? Yeah. This is the creation of the dinosaurs. They were thousands and thousands of years before the creation of man. Right. All right? Yes. Certain species of dinosaurs, which were reptiles, evoluted into an upright creature also, who walks on two and has 5 fingers, but he has webs between them. Right. And they were taken and gone to another galaxy. They now come back and visit. Yeah. All right? Yes. You had other civilizations of people that were taken during a period of time, taken off the planet. For instance, the Mayan people. The Mayan people were taken to another galaxy. Some of them went down into Agrata, where Shambhala is, or Wahala, the city in the center of the world. Others were taken to other galaxies. Right. A lot of empires of people, whole civilizations have disappeared because extraterrestrials came and took them the same way they want to take you, but you won't go. So the creation of the dinosaurs and stuff was during this period of time. All right. The destruction of the dinosaurs was after that time when the planet was hit by a large meteorite, which caused a great sandstorm, which eliminated all living things on the planet. But the seed of life was still in the water, thus man came out of water.
So the point is that this was being spoken about sometime. You see here in the Holy Tablets, released in 1996, 97 and into the revised version, I think 1998. Again, dinosaur people or humanoid dinosaurs. So evolving, as I say, along the same line. Obviously, in that side, it will be the diapsid line as opposed to the synapsid line. Yeah. Now, here you see that some fossils, as he's describing here, in the Cretaceous period, were found in Canada. Interesting enough, yeah. So when we look here about Trudon, and look at the place where it's found. Alberta, Canada. Alberta, Canada. Yeah, where this dinosaur humanoid was found. Interesting place. Yeah, when you start looking at it, I'll leave you to do your own research on that. We may explore that later down, but I'll look you to do your own research. 1776, for those of you who know the White Brotherhood of Euro Freemasonry, how that relates to the interception there. Remember, we taught you before about Albertus Magnus and the Order of Alberts. So this dinosaur fossils, yeah, from this, as I say, humanoid reptilian was found in this particular location, or one of the places it was found. So yeah, read more about Trudon in Is Jesus God? So as I say, you've got here on the sort of left-hand side, what have we got there? So we've got the Mutano, the Draconians, reptilians, and as I say, 2 types. So particularly the ones that we're interested in is the ones with tails, yeah, mixing here with the Anunnaki, understood, and created a Homosaurus. This Homosaurus reptile humanoid with negative blood. Yeah, so Rh negative blood type. So we've got humanoid, or what we're calling Homosaurus Rh negative, correct? Scaly, greenish scales, no fur, no hair, but yellow eyes with red slits in it. 12 feet tall, carnivorous, and also cannibalistic. So carnivorous means cannibalistic. They eat their own, or similar beings to them as well. In a sense, it's a trait of these overlords. Understood. Now, this is taken from, so I don't want to go into movies and all that too much, but interesting enough, as I say, we hear the master teacher obviously speaking as Imam Isa on a class over 30 years ago, talking about this group of humanoid dino men, or homosaurus as we would class it, getting themselves to a certain level where they were unified enough that certain extraterrestrials sought to remove them from the planet. Now, interesting enough, around about 1997, Voyager, Star Trek Voyager, makes a program about some humanoid reptilians who are very highly advanced and then interact with human beings in that particular series. So season 3, episode 23. Go and check that out if that's interesting. It's called Distant Origins. Yeah, so you can see how far away this was mentioned, and how, as I say, while we not want to reject everything that oftentimes these teachers are sent to us want to do, they're listening keenly, and oftentimes are making programs, writing their own books, and quoting stuff that the master teacher has then written, and it's coming in obviously the form of a white male, or maybe less often females, then articulating this information, and then people want to accept it. So a lot of the stuff that's being, as I say, the devil knew this stuff, run up right ahead and makes it into TV programs, so on and so forth. So it makes our story not appear real. You understand? But as I said, they're educating their own in the way they know how, using myth, legend, etc., etc. They're not a fact-based people. They are myth-based people. So, Homosaurus on that side, and then here we see the Pleiadians, or the Mukmatu, humanoid, pale white skin, white fur, white eyes, 9 feet tall, and also carnivorous. Yeah, so here, obviously, originally from the planet, star constellation Pleiades, but coming here, I suppose, by way of Orion. So remember, certain of these extraterrestrials have set up bases in different places. So therefore, they sometimes may have the term Orionian because they've got a base in Orion, or Sirius, so on and so forth. And this sometimes can be confusing to individuals as a result of that. But these two forces, say, came together to try and take over the planet. This is a show, an interesting kind of show cancelled now, called Defiance, where you saw the Pleiadians depicted as we see here in this thing. And interesting enough as well, with that program, there was different hierarchy of different extraterrestrials. The way they play with games, because the ones above them were played by black individuals. They were purple in skin color, but they were played by black people, and they happened to be above them. You understand? And saw them, or one of the things they did was they ate humanoids. Yeah, one of them humanoids, Pleiadians, as well as sort of mating with them and so on and so forth. In their hierarchy, they were particularly powerful. So, and they were called the Olmecs, weirdly enough. Yeah. So again, they like to play a lot of games with these shows, but it's interesting to see some of these depictions. The only thing I suppose this show didn't show was their height. Yeah, at 9 feet tall in comparison to the normal human beings. What you do see is that in the film Prometheus, where you see that, I think there's a precursor to the Alien movies, which, as I say, the first one is very much, as I say, telling you the Casu story there, and the Pleiadians feature. The only difference is they don't have fur. I think they're hairless in that depiction, but they do have the height. And say, if you really overlaid the story, in the sense that alien that you're looking at, that was produced, in the sense it obviously merges with other different races and takes upon their traits, etc., etc. Well, if you replace the alien with the Muadamu, or the hybrid races, you get obviously the story of what's happened. A weaponized individual, or weaponized, that's what they were creating on that planet in Prometheus. A weapon. You understand? A weapon. A germ man. We're bringing it up to today. A germ man. A weapon. Yeah? A genetic weapon in that regard. So, let's say reptilian, I think we explained earlier, that is really talking about from the Draco system, and as I say, you get the humanoid males there. So now, when these Pleiadians came, this is long before the creation of the Muadamu. Yeah, 6,000 years ago. So long before the Pleiadians obviously came to this planet, as been expressed in the book, and they encountered the Mukwafu, yeah, so simian life forms here on the planet Earth. Yes, we've got two types in our language to be describing, and we're going to get more into the debate terms just to get that vibration out and help us as teachers to use it more, and you all as student teachers to use it more, and us as a people just to start using it more. Yeah. So Mukladu apes, so that's the tailless simians. An example of that you see here in the picture is the gibbon, and then we've got tailed simians, Mukradu. Yeah, you see monkeys in that regard. So both obviously being used in different ways in the development of human beings. Yeah. Now, not getting into the story too much of Sirius, because it's not where we really want to go today. But basically, the rhesus, what is being classified as the rhesus monkey, and these giant apes, which we're going to get into in more detail, I think, in the third part of this class, called Kabir Kadam in the last short, Bigfoot, as is known on Earth. So 3 different types, as we see it in the previous slide, were sent. Yeah, so you got white fur, red fur, and then dark or brown fur. Yeah, sent from the Sirius star constellation. Now, Sirius, remember, is a tri-star system, but one of the stars, obviously Sirius A, was deadened, which the tablets talks about as like A Nibiru passing by and draining the energy from that sun, causing it to collapse. When we look at that in the actual facts, we find out that sun was collapsed by the Natharu, not leaving or closing a certain gateway to them in the 19th galaxy. Do you understand what I'm saying? So we see 2 reasons, as I say, why that was closed down, and why we as a people, as their children, have an ascension pathway to make our way back up to them, obviously at the 9 ether levels. Obviously 8 ether and then 7 ether will always be of our own ancestral vibration, but 6 and below is not. Understood? And we're trying to get our way back up to rejoin our etheric ancestors. That would be the esoteric side of our journey, versus the tribal and nation side of our journey. Obviously, is to rebuild our nation to be an autonomous people, and be in the right environments back on Earth where we lived autonomously. If we wanted to interact and deal with other races, then so be it. But in order to get back to what we are, and to strengthen back our genes, and to rid it from forced interception, so in what the so-called kidnapping or slavery, our women were harub, raped. Do you understand? So this is a problem, understood? And so we have to breed that out of our genetics, with the adverse situations, obviously, that have arisen out of that. So you see here, as I say, we've shown this many times before, but we have to start paying attention more and asking the question, as I said earlier, why is it that your ancestors are connecting key monuments, with certain star constellations and certain extraterrestrials? Some of them agreeable to us, some of them more disagreeable to us. So we know, obviously, from the Queen's Chamber here, that is associated with the Sirius star constellation, the King's Chamber associated with Sar, understood, the partner of Ashtat, or husband of Ashtat, and where, say, originally under Project 24, sacred masculine DNA, sacred feminine DNA. But the interesting thing about it is that same Draco star constellation that we talked about, reptilian side, you still find it connected. And when we look inside the pyramid, we see that these connections or chambers, there's a joining point with our, in the pyramid itself, in terms of these shafts. Now, as we said, we are reptilians who are also mammals, or mammals who are also reptilians. And when you look at our progression as it expressed to you in the tablets in chapter 1 in some great detail, and then moving on to now where we are in the actual facts and Partarak, you understand that at the center of our zodiacal referencing or star map, at the center was the hippopotamus deity tied into the deity Patawarat. You understand? Where they get the name Torah from. The name Torah, or the first 5 books of Moses, after Patawarat. And obviously depicted as the river horse or the hippopotamus. Understood? Yeah? Showing that mammals who are also reptiles. Yes, and we just talked about the synapsid development and diapsid development there. Obviously, and then we've branched off into 2 different types, because those things are still prevalent here on Earth. And we can see obviously passive types within the same species and aggressive types within the same species. So what's been expressed is that you're seeing intelligent design, you're seeing extraterrestrial intervention, all as part of the same system. So we have to get into the mindset of our ancient ancestors, you understand, and start to think and feel like them. Obviously, we've got our own modern interpretation as we see ourselves today, where the genes have tumbled forward. But we have to now start to understand what symbolism is and what is taking place. You understand? It's your genetic right, understood, but you have to start putting your mind there, particularly your conscious and your subconscious mind, into now uncovering the secrets. Master what the master teacher is teaching. You understand? Too many people are moving and veering off, and it sounds crazy because people say, well, you're just focusing on that. But if you look at the amount of information, outformation just being put out, you have to master what's in front of you, master what's been put on the table to really uncover, understood, what has been presented to you. There's a reason why so much information has been put out. You understand? Now, whether you want to call it divine, we know divine means extraterrestrial intervention for us, and our Parnathara, our ancestors, always looked out for us. We haven't, because of the spell, always been conscious or aware of who and what they are and how then to interact with them through our own Salafu ancestry, to really take advantage of our full esoteric powers and faculties as we were in ancient times, to use it as a protection as well as progression. So, as I say, these interactions with these so-called adverse forces as well as progressive and positive forces. And so remember, the monotheistic religion never wanted to deal with the reptilian side of our nature, so it pretty much ignored it on that side. So it's only in your ancient Tamaray where we're dealing with both natures, and obviously your eyes are being open to who and what you are. So mammals who are also reptiles. So again, linking, and it shows you, as I say, this interaction with the various different constellations of both those points. This is the Draco star constellation, and obviously you're very familiar with Orion, and obviously Sirius there to the south. So any questions?
No questions.
Okay, so you see there's Sirius, binary star system. Binary star system, but actually originally had 3 stars, you understand, and only more recently, I suppose, in terms of modern day technology, you understand, around about, I suppose, 19th century, they even discovered there was a Sirius or 3rd star as part of this system. But obviously the Dogon in Mali had maps and star maps, highly scientific, first world descendant people there, and as I say, always detected this 3rd aspect of Sirius C, which is a bridge between, as I say, the 18th and 19th galaxies. Here, we've shown these before, but star maps, modern star maps, being compared to the Sirius star maps. And again, this is some of the mysteries of the Sirius star system, which even in the book I've written well over a decade ago, ancient Egypt and the pharaohs, when you read under the section around Ashtar or Aset, it tells you in there are many mysteries surrounding the Sirius star constellation, which is associated with the sacred feminine Ashtar. So a lot more to know about this, and as I say, you need to be curious about it and start looking more into the whole chapter 3, that deals with the Sirius star constellation, and even in more modern times, say about this constellation per se. So, let's say accurate. So the question is, well, how did the Dogon, seemingly simple people, simple lifestyle, they've got no telescopes and things of that nature. Well, how do they know about, these things? So our system of outformation being communicated either directly to the people or by way of teachers being raised up amongst the tribe is shown in these ancient tribes to be a system that's prevalent, that it exists and it works. Because modern day, they can't explain how in the modern day they're confirming many of the things that, say, were simply thought at one time to be mythology. Yeah, but in our culture, it's actually a reality, and then being confirmed as accurate within existence. So, who taught them? You understand? Who gave them the information? What they say of themselves is that they were visited by extraterrestrials. You understand? Who they obviously referred to as the Dogri, which we know in the older tablets are a reptilian set or group of reptilians. You understand? So again, prevalent there in our culture. Nabta player, ancient tracking system to monitor the movement of the Orion star constellation over, as I say, over this last epoch, when, as I say, a new calendar came in, which is the Dendora star map. Now, how is that relevant? Well, we've got modern day symbols, which we've shown before. Of Sirius, we see there eye within a triangle. Interesting enough, and so an eye being the window to the soul. And then we see the modern day symbol of the Orionians with 3 symbols there, so naturally occurring water. We see the hieroglyph, or as I say, Safaf for the sun, and we see the symbol for earth here. So 3 principles needed for life. Yeah, all of which, as I say, Orion or the Orion star constellation played a great role in the starting point. Without that, we would not be here. So clearly, amino acids, the elements that the development of amino acids came from there, as well as made up what we call water, came from the Orion star constellation. So again, prevalent role in our culture. And then Mazara'ah farm, which we'll be talking about more, as I say, in part 3 of this class. So we see a symbol here, 2-4, you understand? 24, yep, 2 and then 4 in the Sabaic Rakamat or number system. Again, see the moon here, yeah, 5-point star, and then we see it's different type of energies trying to get in to 9, in fact, trying to get into this environment. See, and are blocked, seemingly, yeah, in the farm. Yeah, so which we say we need to get into. Now, what time we got here? 30. Okay, let me continue for about 10 more minutes, then we'll move on to part 2 next week. So, as I say, so Simeon's sent from the Sirius star constellation. So we got, say, white fur, dark brown fur, and then the red fur, yeah, coming from here, or sent, I should say, as a test. 15 feet in tall, that's why 15 foot tall, referring to as the big foot. And so even in the language, you see simian, or the word simian, from the Latin simia means ape, and then monkey, from the Spanish, French word mona, means ape. So when you're saying monkey, you're saying mona, ape, of earth, or earth, ape or ape man of Earth. Do you understand? This is what you're expressing there when we're using some of these terminologies there. So this is what the Pleiadians encountered, say, when they came here to produce, as I say, the first set of hybrids for them. So this is prior, as I say, to the Muad'Dam or the Adamite 6,000 years ago. And so here, from Proverbs of Yaanuwn, we see a map here showing, as I say, two different lines, tailless and then tailed monkey, which produce these Rh positive, which are D antigen. I'm going to get into that, as I say, later to explain what that is, versus blood types without the D antigen, Rh negative blood types, both having 48 chromosomes. And obviously, we as human beings have 46 chromosomes. So sometimes the way they're able to interact is because they've got even numbers. So because they've got even numbers, then they're able to mesh or merge them together. So we see in this instance. So tailed monkey, we see that the rhesus monkey, which representative really of these three different types of Bigfoot, one may say, that was sent here, overstood. Now, even in the rhesus monkey, they have the white, red, and dark fur versions that was sent here, as I say, by way of Sirius. So later down the line, so they mix their genes then with these monkeys, and then later use the baboon and the the baboon on the mandrill, obviously, which ended up producing Cro-Magnon. So the first one, which somebody mentioned earlier, I think Sertet mentioned earlier, about the flugel rods. So the flugel rods is the Cro-Magnon man. We'll go into that in a bit more detail. So those three, or this line here, we've got the Celtics. Celtics represent of three different strains or strands. We've got the Norwegians, the Swedish, and we've got the Danes. Yeah, and so they produced obviously the Vikings. Yeah, out of that stock, yeah, produced the Vikings. Yeah, but we know Vikings, not Vikings. It's V1, yeah, 5 and 1. So V Roman for 5, numeral, and then I is single for 1. So the 6 kingdoms, or the 6 kinsmen, kingdoms of these Celtics, later on obviously became, here what we see here, Irish, Scots, Poles, Brits, and Welsh, under various different names. You understand? But this is their tribal clans from 6 gene pools. Understood? 6 sets of gene pools. Cro-Magnon obviously being one of those sets of genes. Obviously, on the other side, we've got the use of, or the tailless monkey, from beings from Orion and Sirius star constellations being intermixed, and then producing the Sands people and the Wathabi. So here we've got 4 sections. So here, as we understand, here 9 species, 7 species, and the Asians 3 species. So this relates to a race's physical ethers, or planetary nations' physical ethers. So physical ether is different to ether when we're talking about energy. Physical ether is a system set up that talks about basically the species within a race. Yeah, so we have 9 different types of Nagar Nadu or Negroid people that exist within our race. Yeah, from the science people, the original, let's say, to very blue-black, as you would classify as a very dark-skinned individual. So different hues in human, but different hues within that. We've got 9 species. The East Indians, or the Dravanadu, they have 7 species, and the Asians have 3 species. Now, we are the most mixed out of probably any race on Earth, unintentionally, you understand, whereas the Mukasu or the Caucasoids obviously seek to mix, not only in one sense to try and take other races out, but obviously because of their recessive gene traits, they needed to mix with other races to prolong their existence here on Earth as hybrids. You understand? As we know, when the issue with hybrids is that, for example, if you mix a donkey and a horse together, you create a mule, correct? But a mule can't mate with another mule to produce another mule. Yeah, so you have to do the same thing again. You have to mix those original mixture again to produce the one, say, hybrids. This is a problem, obviously, that they had to encounter. So the Rh negative blood type comes from the Pleiadians. The Pleiadians are Rh negative, as well as the Draconians themselves, which we're not talking about on this particular slide. But the Draconians themselves, or those reptilians, are also Rh negative. So the Rh negative factor there is coming from extraterrestrials, you understand, insofar as them being cold-blooded. You understand? Again, for the environments where they came from, that was what was obviously appropriate, and they're obviously relocating to Earth. So that interaction, them moving, is considered to be unnatural or going against nature. So their creation, and you could look at it in several ways. So them not being part of the Galactic Federation from an extraterrestrial point of view, and then carrying out experimentation on individuals, on races without permission, would be going against the natural order of things. Understood? As well as you introducing things in the environment that are going against the environment because you haven't used or followed a certain pattern or system established with that planet being under the control of or being monitored by extraterrestrials that are part of it, and respecting certain ways of working, so on and so forth. So today, for example, when we think about food, we have organic food and then we have food. You understand? So the organic food has to be grown a certain way. There's certain organizations that monitor that and give it its official stamp or whatever the case may be, and then we can say, okay, well, that's considered to be organic food versus other maybe more artificial processes of farming or growth that don't meet that criteria, so therefore cannot be stamped with organic. So that's the way to look at natural natured, unnatural natured, normal, abnormals, in terms of the recessive gene traits or whatever on this side of things. Any questions on that?
Yes, I have a question from Judith. Were the Sans people from the tailless apes?
So the Sans people were from, or so to say, interventions in the Sans people has meant that they've been used, and the monkeys were used in their development also as well at a certain point. So originally we came from the waters of this planet, but our humanoid structure as well has had interception with tailless apes like the gibbon and other life forms. So the gibbon, for example, has a working thumb. This is one of the things that separates human beings, or that aspect of human beings from other apes, is that you can take your thumb, for example, and you can tap all of your fingers with your thumb. So we have a working thumb as opposed to that. So this is where, I haven't got the diagram up, but you see the diagram where you get the aquatic ape, because obviously part of our structure came from the waters of this planet, and then, as I say, they've intermixed some aspects of that with this tailless monkey, you understand? So at a certain point, so hence why you see them as they are today. Yeah, it's a combination of the two. Any other questions?
Yes, there's another question from Judith. Also, were the Sans people first dark-skinned, then later light, like now?
No. So, good question. So no, they've always been that color. So dark-skinned is obviously it can denote stronger genes, but when you understand it in looking at us as 9 species, then all of those species are strong in genes, strong in genetic strength. Really, genetic strength is denoted by the texture of their hair. So when you look in the Sands people, for example, their hair texture is almost grain-like. Insofar as it's that tight. I mean, you'd probably break a few Afro combs if you tried to comb, you understand, their hair. That's how tough it is. But remember that there were markers left in those individuals. They're like almost like a genetic barcode in terms of characteristics that the Sands people hold. The Sands people, well, no, they were the color they were, but they also have, remember, the genetic markers of each of the other races. So the folded eyelids of the Oriental, you see that in the Sands people. The indented chin of the Dravidian, you see that in the Sands people. The hair texture of the Nagaru, you understand, Wabar, the only people with hair, not fur, you see that in the Sands people. And they have the bridged brow of the Aborigines, another older one of the first races. So these are like genetic barcodes, almost in a sense, to say, hey, that's our people, don't mess with them. Do you see what I'm saying? And so that is, you see them all in the Sands people. They do not have the colorless iris of the Makasu or the Caucasoid. So all of those natural occurring or natural nature races you see in the Sands people. So the genetic strength, I think if that's what your question is from the hair texture, denotes the genetic strength within our species of different hues of brown. Yeah, and this is because, remember, the Morazaku or the Riskians are responsible for the Sands people's creation. Understood? Yeah, so they place waters in the Indian Ocean, or place germs in the Indian Ocean to develop, obviously, into mermen, merwomen. You understand? Obviously, the women then got thrown onto land by way of tsunamis. Yeah, and so that produced, you understand, with some help and manipulation, that produced the original Sands people. But you've had other interventions which have helped to produce then different types of species along the way. So, which I don't know if we get time to go to this, but we'll go through. So we'll go through this star map, I suppose, in some detail, where we get a separation. We'll go through this, it won't be in today's class, but you see the Sands people here. Then we're getting a separation between the Sands people and the Wathabi, which end up in the Americas, understood? So we get a split in our line, and then we go up here into West Africa, and this is where we've got an intervention here by the Natharu, understood? So separate from the Riskians, let's say, still part of the same family, but separated to create the different types of races. So Sands people first, but there are obviously different interventions within, which has created obviously the 9 different aspects of us in that regard. But we'll go through that in more detail in the next part of this class. Any other questions?
Yes, we have another question. If we came from the water, why in the Bible does it say dust?
Good question. First of all, let me separate out, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with that stuff, but the Bible is not our story, so let's get that straight. We are millions of years before your Bible stories came into place. The Bible story is dealing with the creation of the white race, in a sense. So let's get that very specific. The Adamites, or Adam, which Adam was red and ruddy, is dealing with the creation of the white race. And so it's not talking about us. When it talks about dust, what you're really speaking about there, we may cover this, we will cover this maybe more in part 2, maybe into part 3. When you talk about dust, it's talking about congealed blood. So here, when you're interested in, so when you talk about dust of the ground, and then going into the rib and all of that story. Remember, in the bone or bone marrow, that is where blood cells are generated from. And so when blood comes outside of the body and it dries and it congeals, it turns into dust. So that's what it's talking about. Yeah, the way in which they needed to take this hybrid, as we just give you the example previously, and make the hybrid be able to procreate on its own. So it didn't require a cloning process of producing these particular individual hybrids. And as we spoke about or touched upon earlier in the class, which we'll go into more in part 2, they were trying to use their own hybrids when they came back. So let's say this first intervention we're talking about here is just dealing with the Pleiadians, but they later came back to produce what you're talking about in terms of your biblical story 6,000 years ago, in combination with the Anunnaki and the Pleiadians working together to produce a being in their image and after their likeness. Another name for the Pleiadians is the Luciferians. Yeah, so Luciferians is another name for the Pleiadians. They are your devils or whatever of the Bible, you understand, and the Quran, so on and so forth, or gods as devils, you understand, yeah? As well as the reptilian seed, obviously the Satanists. So these combination of the two came back, as I say, to produce a new hybrid. But they had to try and overcome this issue of getting them to be able to self-replicate, if you want to call it, or be self-producing, self-replicating, so on and so forth. There's probably a better way of saying that. But and as a result, when they came back to try and use these hybrids, which they produced, it didn't work. So they stole, you understand, or went in and took, let's say, and used the Sands people, and that produced, as I say, a being which we'll get into, as I say, in part 2, named Titi, who you're calling Eve, and Adapa, who is being called Adam in the Sumerian story, using those 7 birth mothers that we looked at when we was looking at the symbolism of the star constellation, using them 7 birth mothers. And Ninti, or Ninhursag, also known as Sakumtat in ancient Egypt, and they used her in order to try and perfect this individual. So the Adapa or Adama type of project or whatever, remember, you got to go 16 generations back before 16 generations down before they got to the perfected, or they considered to be perfected hybrid that you'll see in here in various different types of forms and shapes as the Rh negative hybrid. So they consider that to be the pure white seed. Some pure white seed, not mixed hybrids. And we'll get into that later, because obviously the coronavirus situation is designed to take out a certain group of hybrids. You understand? Take out a certain type of hybrid, you understand, which they've obviously become consider them to be problematic, not pure seeded, and so therefore sought to intervene and wipe a number of these individuals which they originally responsible for creating, wipe them out. So we get into that, I'll say, more in part 2. So long story explained, dust is congealed blood. Other questions?
Yes, from a question from Selket, it looks like. Can you just expand on this again? Are you saying that we have the monkey gene?
Yes. Yeah, tailless monkeys, I say. Certain aspects of our structure, obviously, when coming onto land, excuse me, because remember, we're looking at even this map and diagram. Let me go back to the one before, actually. Yeah, but should I say, we're going to go into more detail to make it clear. So here you see Natharu here as Ogdoad. You understand? Yeah, so the Ogdoad is us in the waters. Yeah, and you see 4 sets, isn't it, of Ogdoads. And even when you look at the Sands people today and you analyze their language, Khoisan, it is a clicking language, correct? So it sounds like understand certain aspects of it. And actually, if you look at now and take that under the waters, and you see how dolphins speak, remember, part of our way they transported the DNA that they placed in the waters, was by way of the dolphin, by way of Sirius, and sent that here and caused that dolphin to defecate in the waters, which led obviously to the development of us in the waters in various ways, shapes, and forms to become, say, the original merman and merwoman. Now, remember, these genes have been, life forms have been evolved to a certain level at certain points. You know, major catastrophes on the planet have happened, you understand? And then they've taken, at certain points, they've taken cells or genes out of the water, stored them in other places or bases. And, you know, when it's come time to repopulate the planet now again, they've been able to take that life form and place it back at the point where it evoluted to. Do you understand? So this is a combination of various different stages of growth, even the planet not even looking the same as what it does today along this journey. Understood? So those waters were placed, which produced a water type creatures, the Ogdoads. Now, when you start getting into the Enneads, then we can see here an interception in the genes there with the use of, as I say, certain apes, tailless apes, where they've binded their genes upon, which is to say has helped to develop the humanoid form that we have today. But it's not the same as obviously the type of apes that we used for the Mokasu. As I say, our working thumb comes from, as I say, some of those monks or monkeys. And so you can read about that in tablets. In the chapter 1 in the tablets, you read about that in great detail. Goes into the different types of simians that were used. And so maybe in the third part, we'll go into more detail in the Bigfoot scroll. The problem as well, what you have today is the genes have been scrambled so much today. So even in those original life forms, today when you're looking at certain individuals, as I say, it's been scrambled. It's not as pure as it was in terms of that delineation, how it was before. And one of the keys is that Inky mixed in the sense that we intercepted our genes, understood, or intercepted it as part of that project. So that interception as well, whether Parnathara approved it at that particular point or not, is not clear, but that interception by way of them has happened. So it is part of our story as well, for certain types of apes. And it ties into the nature of certain human beings as well, because we are much more passive. So that's coming from, as we mentioned earlier, that diapsid, which is the more aggressive line, versus the cyanapsid, which is the more passive line. But you also see that in the type of simian that was used as well. So the mandrill and the baboon are much more aggressive type of simian, which we see today, versus certain types of, say, monkey that we used in our development, which are much more passive in nature. And hence why you've got these lines here, herbivorous and carnivorous, as I say, which we'll go into more in part 2 and we explain. And how the planet then was split up into the western and eastern zones of Nupu and Zupu to keep, as I say, the herbivores and the carnivores and the omnivores separated to each other at a certain point to allow them to develop individually. So, any other questions?
Yes, one more question from Adorna. What is the significance of the indented chin?
So it simply is the way in which, for beings of that level of technology, it's a way of putting certain markers, say, on the individual so that you can identify that that's yours. So like a farmer, I suppose, will stamp cattle with a certain ID tag or whatever the case may be. Well, this is their version of that, to show that yes, this is ours. This is our development. We invested time. Obviously, they're not dealing with money, but time and resources in this individual, which we consider to be our children. You understand? And so clearly, when you see those individual markers in others, because the Planetary obviously have those in all the science people, that's showing you as well that they're then combined with the same system of development, or it's an approved project of development, as opposed to it being against what was being done. You understand? In that regard. So that's its thing. Whether it has a additional biological function, I'm not sure of, so maybe something to look into, but it is a characteristic. That's how it's used, and so it denotes planetary nations or races, one different from another. Any other questions?
No further questions, Nabab Kakni Hess. No further questions.
All right, we're at 5 o'clock. I probably got halfway through all the stuff that I was probably doing. So we're back again next week. So we'll finish this part and then go more into bloodlust and religion. So we've covered some of those elements today, but based on some of the questions here as well, it'd be good because, I say, you'll see more clearly how these different lines have come across and how the hybrids have been created. We'll go into the blood system, so you can be more than happy to do your own research on that before we get into it, so it makes more sense. Obviously, the blood types are being mentioned in several different scrolls and books, but we will go into that in some detail. So you need to understand basic hematology, I suppose, at a very basic level, to understand the difference between A, B, O blood types. So we go into that in some detail next week, and then, as I say, tie it all back into how it relates to what is taking place today with the coronavirus, and how, as I say, certain how can we describe them as sacred societies linked in, because obviously at a certain point the Pleiadians have discarded their hybrids of their project, and now certain extraterrestrials, in the ones we're talking about, want to get rid of all of the hybrids except the pure seeded ones. We've got even mixed hybrids that they don't particularly care for. They're interested in the pure white seeded hybrids, and the ones that came out of, which we didn't show on the screen yet, but the ones that came out of those hybrids, which are dark hair, dark-eyed, and ivory skin-toned. So there's a separate plan for those sets of hybrids versus, let's say, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, the white-haired, white-eyed, and the red hair and green-eyed hybrids. You understand? So why are we getting done by coronavirus? It's because you've got mixed genes. Yeah, we've got mixed genes, as well as, say, adverse health conditions, and some of us find ourselves in a lot of jobs where you're interacting with a lot of different people, but we've also got mixed genes. Yeah, so we need to explore that in part 2, into part 3 of this class. Okay, there's no more questions. I've probably taken up more of your time than you needed to today, so we've gone a bit over. So thank you for staying on. As I say, we'll cover this in part 2 and 3. So maybe a similar time, maybe, say 4:30, maybe around about 5 o'clock, because we've got a lot to cover if it's of interest to people that don't mind slightly going over in that regard. So thank you for turning up today. If you make sure you've registered for parts 1 and 2 of the session, which I think this was part 2 organised, I can't remember. So, but make sure you register for both parts, part 1 and 2, so that you get notification in advance of the classes. The links are on the Facebook page and obviously in the advertisement. If you've already registered, you don't need to register again. You should get a reminder email through 1 week before the class, and also I think 1 day before, then 1 hour before the class commences. Okay, so this recording hopefully be out sometime this week on the YouTube channel. If you do have any questions and you are registered with us on the Zoom platform, then just use the email address and you can email questions in between classes, and we'll do our best to get to them and answer your questions in detail or pick them up as part of these classes. Okay, well, thank you all. I see one raised hand, so maybe someone wants to ask a quick one just before we disappear.
Okay, this is a question from Keith. Keith, you have your hand raised. I'm going to allow you to talk. Could you make sure that your mic is unmuted? Now you are allowed to talk, Keith. Would you like to ask your question, Keith? Keith, you have your hand raised. Would you like to ask a question? Five, four, three, two, one. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. So yeah, so it's closing out. So thank you to those joining us on Facebook. So same time next week. So just remember that, because it was a rescheduled class. So we're back on again next week, not next 2 weeks. So back on next Sunday, and then back on again the Sunday after that, and then after that we'll go into our fortnightly cycle. So you got us for 3 weeks because we've been a bit delayed. So 3 weeks and then back into fortnightly. Yeah, so please join us so you don't miss out on what we've started to build up today, so we can move on this subject and get into more detail, because I know there's a lot of questions, and so they do make things even clearer as we go into later classes, so you get the let's say his story, but from the perspective of our story. Okay, everybody, take care, have a great week, protect yourselves, look after yourselves and your families, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Tauta, Musa, Wadu.
Bye.